My parents have chased away every boyfriend I have ever had. How can I prevent this from ruining my relationship with my current boyfriend? Original, February 13th, 2025. I was very shy during high school and didn't leave my house unless I had to. So as a result, I didn't get a boyfriend until my freshman year of college. After 7 months of dating my first ever boyfriend, I brought him to my parents' house for dinner. You know, just so they could meet him. I had to step away for roughly 10 minutes to help my older sister with her baby, and when I came back, my BF and my dad were having a full-blown fistfight. We managed to stop them, and my BF stormed off without saying anything, while my dad insisted my F was incredibly rude and disrespectful to him and my mother, and that a guy like that was no good for me, because he just ended up doing the same thing to me. I was shocked that my BF could do such a thing, because he had always been extremely sweet, and I've never met or heard of anyone not liking him. But when I called him and told him what my dad had said about what happened, all he did was laugh and say, I can believe whatever I want, before blocking me on everything. I was deeply disturbed by this, but my mom and sister insisted that he had just shown his true colors, and said my dad saved me from an abuser. I reluctantly accepted this, but something about it felt really off. I met my second boyfriend several months later, during my sophomore year. Part of me still felt my parents were part of the problem with my last BF, so I managed to get him to wait an entire year before introducing him to my parents. From the moment she laid eyes on him, every word my mom spoke to him was dripping with fake friendliness and subtle jabs, implying she did not approve of him, which made him visibly uncomfortable. While we were eating dinner, she began asking me why I decided to date my BF, and asked about other guys and why they didn't work out. Some of the guys she asked about were completely made up. At this point, it was clear what they were trying to do, and I silently vowed to talk to my boyfriend and tell him how my parents were trying to sabotage me. Unfortunately, it didn't get that far, as my dad chipped in and demanded to know how a boy, who couldn't support himself financially, was ever going to support his daughter. Mind you, we were both juniors in college at this point, and both of us were working part-time jobs. So this question was really insane. He responded by saying he'd already decided he wanted nothing to do with his family, and was planning to break up with me when he got home, but he's just going to leave now. Within minutes, he was gone, and I was blocked. Again, my parents insisted they did nothing wrong, and just wanted to test his confidence as any parents would. But I pointed out that this was the second boyfriend they chased away, and they didn't do anything to scare off my older sister's husband. I went low contact with them after that, but fast forwarding a little bit, I eventually allowed them to gaslight me into introducing them to my third boyfriend, whom I had met towards the end of my senior year, and basically the same thing happened. I had made it through college, unable to find a long-term BF, purely because of my parents. I did meet my current boyfriend, 28 male, 2 years ago, and I have managed to avoid introducing him to my family thus far. If he ever brought it up, I would always have a ready-made excuse, prepared to explain why it wasn't possible, which has been pretty easy, because he usually only asks about them when planning for major holidays. I have fallen madly in love with him, and hope to start a family with him one day, but he recently told me that he can't even allow me to move in with him until he's had a chance to meet my family. I do not know what to do, as I know my parents will make it their mission to break us up if they meet him, but based on his insistence on meeting them, I realize I can't put this off any longer. Usually relationships end because of something one person in the relationship says or does, and it's incredibly unfair that I always end up single because of things I cannot control. I want to tell my F about my parents and insist that meeting them is a bad idea, but I've listened in on some of his conversations with his friends, and the general consensus among them seems to be that a girl with a super dysfunctional family is a massive red flag and an indicator of what their married life would be like. So I come here asking, how do I approach the problem that is my parents, without risking losing the longest relationship I've ever had? If my parents end up being the cause of yet another breakup, I just don't know what I'll do. I just don't know. Edit. Wow. I made this post about an hour before going to bed, but woke up to quite a few comments here. Thank you so much to everyone who has helped me realize what I need to do. I've read through all of the comments and saw some recurring questions come up that I wanted to address. I am not fully in contact with my parents, primarily because they helped me a lot financially during college, and when I first graduated and was looking for a job. When I went low contact with them, they constantly yelled at me for being ungrateful and said family does not turn on each other over minor disagreements involving boys. It sounds ridiculous when I type it here, but after months of this treatment, when I found myself faced with the decision to either tell them I forgive them so they'll pay for my dorm room, or refuse to forgive them and have to move back home, I ended up caving. Why didn't I stand up for my past BFs when I saw them being verbally abused? I don't know. I've never been allowed to talk back to my parents, so the thought of calling them out while we have company over is not something I realized I could do, I guess. My arguments with them after they ran off BF 2 and 3 were the only times I've ever come into full conflict with them in my entire life. I will be going to my boyfriend's house today after work and will tell him everything. I am terrified. He will still want to meet them. Just thinking about it has me shaking at my desk. But you all are right. He has a right to know and make his own decision. Edit 2. I told him and even showed him this post. To make a long story short, he still would like to meet them, but thanked me for telling him, as he always figured something was seriously wrong. My parents host dinners for our family every Sunday, and we will be attending this one. I suppose I'll make a new post with an update afterwards. Top comments. Comment 1. You stop bringing anyone you like around them. Period. Tell your boyfriend why. They get weird and run anyone you date off with their nonsense, and you'd rather just avoid them altogether. My boyfriend knows all about my dysfunctional family and abusive upbringing. It didn't run him off. If anything, it brought us closer as he empathized. AITA. We just celebrated 6 years together. The right partner won't hold your family against you. You couldn't choose them after all. Comment 2. If your plan is to stay with him in the long run, you have 2 options. 1. Come clean about why you don't want them to meet and explain exactly why you're scared of them meeting. Or 2. Cut off your parents entirely and tell your boyfriend you cut them off. Ideally, either way you end up telling him why you chose what you chose. Good relationships take communication, and if your boyfriend doesn't know why he's being kept away from your family, that most likely will be the reason you break up. Update. February 18th, 2025. 5 days from original update. I meant to make this update a lot sooner, but since my last post, a lot has happened. I truly appreciate all the comments I received, calling me out for hiding my parents being insane from my BF, and encouraging me to be honest with him. My boyfriend is pretty involved now, so I guess I should give him a fake name. I will call him Ethan. I sat Ethan down and told him about my parents, and how they ran off my previous boyfriends, before showing him my original post, as many recommended. Fortunately, he did not seem to care that I hadn't told him, but he did agree with many commenters that my parents were more than just insane. They were outright abusive. Although he understood how I felt, he still said he would like to meet them, both to see it for himself, but also because he felt there was an underlying reason for their behavior. My parents have dinner for the family every Sunday, which I have been attending on the weeks that I'm not hanging out with Ethan that day, so we agreed that he would come to the next one. When Sunday came and we arrived at my parents' house, my anxiety was through the roof. Ethan had agreed to leave with me the moment things started to get out of hand. But with my parents, that could have easily been as soon as we walked through the front door. My parents were surprisingly very nice though. My dad actually seemed excited to see Ethan, and my mom fawned over her daughter bringing home such a handsome, confident-looking man. I couldn't understand what was happening. Ethan even shot me a look a couple times, as if to silently ask if he was missing something. Because my parents were actually lovely, I want to provide a play-by-play of the entire night, but the post would just be too long. The point is, my parents had done a complete 180 from their previous behavior, and it made me look and feel crazy for trying to warn Ethan about them ahead of time. During dinner, my mom said she was so happy to see her daughter had finally found someone who wasn't judgmental and was willing to give me a chance because of the person I am today. Because the past doesn't matter. My heart dropped. What was she talking about? Ethan said he does not know about anything in my past that may be cause of concern, and my parents exchanged a concerned look as if it was rehearsed. My dad asked him why he thinks my previous relationships failed, and he said that he was under the impression they got scared away after meeting my parents. My mother looked at me with disappointment on her face and said, "Oh, P, is that really what you told him?" I was at a loss for words, but Ethan was not. He said that it's pretty clear they are trying to plant seeds of doubt in him about our relationship, but he is not interested, as he knows me well enough to know my character, and that even if there was something serious in my past, parents who loved and supported me, or even just wanted grandchildren, would keep it a secret to avoid ruining my relationship. My dad said he already has 2 grandchildren, and motioned towards my sister, who did not have her kids with her that evening. Ethan said, my dad must have been very supportive of my sister, for her to be able to start a family while he tries to run off any guy I bring home, and my dad's response was very casual, but extremely shocking. He said, of course, she's actually mine. Everyone was quiet for a few moments, until Ethan spoke up, and said that now, all of the abuse they've only put me through is starting to make sense. My mom said he's spouting nonsense, and that I have not been abused in any way. She then looked at me and admitted her marriage had a rocky start, but both her and my father have moved past that. I was too busy replaying my entire life in my head to say anything. The previous boyfriends, the lack of support for my social outings growing up, the volleyball games I had to have a friend drive me to because my parents were always too busy, the rage I was always at risk of facing if I ever spoke my mind, all while my sister got the opposite. I started to cry, the hardest I ever have. Ethan immediately announced that we were leaving. My dad demanded we stay where we are so we can clear things up, but Ethan ignored him as he pulled me out of my chair and led me away. My mom screamed at me not to leave, and that this guy was trying to isolate me from my family. I yelled back that if anyone had been trying to isolate me, it was her, for my whole life. As we drove back to Ethan's place, my mom sent me several text messages, cussing me out, saying one mistake doesn't change the fact that my dad loved, supported, and raised me, and that he would always be my real father. Ethan said, he's not my dad. He's an abusive, controlling asshole who was taking his insecurities out on me. I ended up blocking both of my parents' numbers because they were saying some truly awful things to me, both about myself and Ethan. Ethan said he was expecting them to be crazy, but this was far worse than he could have anticipated. He said, I need to go into therapy immediately, and that he will pay for anything my insurance doesn't cover. My parents showed up at my apartment twice yesterday to demand I come out and speak to them, but I've been staying at Ethan's all weekend and will likely be here all week. I'm not sure if this is the update y'all wanted. I had countless people enraged at me for being spineless and not standing up to my parents. And while I had planned on doing so, that's not what happened. I don't know what is going to happen with my parents, or where I go from here. But now that the holiday is over, I can spend some time looking for a good therapist. Top comments. So your mom cheated on your dad. and you are the affair baby, and they treated you poorly because of that? Is that the story? Or has my reading comprehension failed me? Maybe you have a great father out there somewhere. 23 and me? Ethan sounds great. The truth shall set you free. My husband is blind to his work wife, ruining our marriage. She manipulates him, and even calls him her husband, right in front of me. Original post, the 9th of February 2025. I, 31 female, am at my wit's end with my husband's 32 male coworker, Sarah, 30 female, and his complete inability to see what's happening. I'm not usually one for Reddit, but I need to know if I'm going crazy here. Where do I even start? 3 years ago, my husband Mark started working with Sarah. At first, I tried to be welcoming. I invited her to our BQs, included her in group outings, and genuinely tried to be friendly. Big mistake. She spent the entire time making backhanded comments about everything from my career. Oh, you're just a yoga instructor? How peaceful. To my cooking, I guess not everyone can master basic seasoning. The real problem is that Mark thinks she's just being funny. Last month, she literally threw away the anniversary mug I gave him because it clashed with the office aesthetic. When I got upset, Mark said I was being too sensitive and that Sarah just has high standards for office decor. It was a mug with our wedding photo on it. Some greatest hits from Sarah. She scheduled a mandatory work dinner on our anniversary. She convinced Mark not to take a promotion because it would mean working with a different team. She posts daily photos of them together with hashtags like more at rework power couple and dosh work spouse. She tells everyone at their office that she takes better care of him than I do. She changed his coffee order and now tells everyone she trained him right. The worst part? My husband is completely blind to all of this. Yesterday, he actually told me about how Sarah said our new house, which we spent months searching for, was charming in a starter home kind of way. He repeated this while laughing. I tried talking to him about it, but Sarah has convinced him I'm just insecure. She's managed to insert herself into every aspect of our lives. They text constantly, even on weekends. She knows his schedule better than I do. She rearranged his entire desk and office wardrobe because his style was too suburban husband. That's what he is. Last week, I suggested marriage counseling. He looked genuinely confused. He, of course, went and talked to Sarah about it. I found out from another coworker that she's been telling people that Mark and I are going through a rough patch, and that she's just being a good friend by giving him someone to talk to. We weren't going through anything until she started this nonsense. The breaking point? I stopped by his office to surprise him with lunch. I know, but it was his birthday, and Sarah was supposedly out sick. Guess who was there? Sarah. She'd miraculously recovered and bought him a cake that said, "To my work hubby," with a photo of them from the office holiday party. She saw me and said, "Oh, Amy, you came too. How nice. Mark, you didn't tell me your real wife was coming. I'm not crazy, right? This woman is trying to destroy my marriage, while my husband stands there grinning like it's all some big joke. What should I do? Divorce seems extreme, but I'm running out of options here. TLDR. My husband's work wife is actively trying to sabotage our marriage, while he remains completely oblivious to her obvious manipulation. ETA. I should have stated that the promotion wasn't one that would increase his salary, but his title. It would give him more leadership experience. It still blows my mind that he turned it down, just so he could stay on the same team as her. I should have told the mug story in its entirety. She accidentally broke the mug. I noticed it was gone when I was visiting him one day, and I asked him about it. He said she accidentally knocked it over, and then later he repeated a joke she made about how it didn't fit the office aesthetic. Top comments. Comment 1. Sarah would not be able to sabotage your marriage if your husband wasn't allowing it. Comment 2. You have a husband problem. Go to counseling and get professional help to communicate your concerns. Remind him that he's married to you, not Sarah, so her opinions shouldn't matter when it comes to your marriage. Good luck, but be prepared for the worst. Comment 3. Yeah, this guy isn't oblivious. He's complicit. He knows what's happening, and he likes the attention. He is happy to let his girlfriend disrespect his wife. Update. February 13th, 2025. 4 days later. Hi. I, 31 female, posted a few days ago. I really didn't expect my post to blow up the way it did. I got so overwhelmed by all the comments that I haven't responded to any. I want to address everyone who says it's fake. I understand why you think that, but this is my personal hell. I only listen to Reddit stories on TikTok, but when this reached its boiling point, I just needed a place to talk. So, I made an account and tried to yell into the void. Well, the void turned out to be less empty than I thought. Now, to why everyone is here, the update. Before I talked to my husband, 32 male, I decided to do some investigation. I started with his phone and read all the messages between him and Sarah. She badmouthed me a few times. He did nothing to defend me, but didn't engage either. She was flirty. He wasn't really flirty back. They talked a lot, and he praised her frequently for her work ethic and intelligence. I didn't see anything about cheating. I checked his email, nothing. I checked his work email, nothing. I looked through our other devices, nothing. I searched high and low for a second phone, nothing. Everything I found was always dancing that line. Nothing was outright cheating, but here are the things I found that did hurt my feelings. He has lunch with her, and only her, every day in the office. They don't really like anyone else, so they'll criticize others and say, "Let's talk more at lunch. They're serving XYZ today." He'd say things like, "I'm sure if you were a wife, you would XYZ. He always kept it as a wife, and not my wife, but it still upset me. She admitted to breaking the mug on purpose. He didn't get upset with her, just said, yeah. The photo gifs are kind of corny. I confronted him. I laid it all out. And while he wasn't upset, he did try to brush things off. He said I was being sensitive and overreacting. I told him if we didn't have a real conversation about this, I would file for divorce. That got his attention, and he sat down with me. He admitted that at first, he found it odd that Sarah was trying so hard. He saw her trying hard with all the men in the office. The more attention she gave him, the more he enjoyed it. And the more he responded, the more attention she gave, until she just had her sights on him. He knew some of the other men were envious, and he liked that too. He admitted that eventually, he just got too deep. He said he knew it was wrong, but had gotten addicted to the attention and didn't want her to move on to another man. So he indulged her sometimes at my expense. He said it was just nice to have two women in the two major parts of his life, stating that he knew we'd rarely see one another. So what was the harm? He reiterated that he never ever physically cheated with her, but admitted it could be called an emotional affair. It was painful. I won't hide that. I mean really painful, like I wasn't enough. I told him from this point on, he needed to stop communicating with Sarah and ask to be transferred or switch jobs altogether. Now folks, I mean it when I tell you this. He lost his shit. He began raising his voice, saying things like he never cheated. It was all above board, and I couldn't control who he talked with at work. He called me a narcissist and a control freak. He told me I had no idea how hard it was, how much stress he had in the office, and that his personal relationship with Sarah helps a lot. Taking it away would just damage his mental health. It got so bad that I started crying. I couldn't take it anymore and decided to leave. I packed a small bag and called my mill. She's the only family I have here. I gave her a rundown of what was going on, and she offered her home to me. I'm staying here, and just hoping my husband calms down so we can revisit this. I want to work it out. I love him more than anything. I will try harder to answer comments on this post, and I will definitely update if something new happens. This has been really therapeutic and makes me feel less alone. TLDR. I confronted my husband about his work wife, and he lost it on me. Now, I'm staying with my mother-in-law. Top comments. Comment 1. Welp, I kinda figured he wasn't that clueless. This is a full-blown emotional affair. From experience, things will only escalate when they are in bed together. Protect your peace, because he sure doesn't give a damn about your feelings. Stay strong. Comment 2. Jumped right from admitted. It could be called an emotional affair. 2. He began raising his voice, saying things like he never cheated. OP made a valiant effort, but it doesn't seem like this marriage can be saved. Additional comments from OP about her male. My male is on my side and told me point blank that he is wrong. However, she said she doesn't want to get in the middle because she doesn't want to damage the relationship with either one of us. She told me I'm welcome as long as I need, but she won't bring anything up to her son until he brings it up to her. My male agrees his actions are wrong, but doesn't want things to escalate or to damage her relationship with either one of us, so she is staying out of it unless he contacts her. As for my husband, he has tried to reach out. He's called, left message, texted. I let him know I was safe and left it at that. He will message or call every few hours, but we haven't talked. New update. Update 2. February 14th, 2025. One day from previous update. Well, I'm back. First, I want to address some of the negative comments to all the people saying they're Team Sarah and hoping Sarah and my husband get together. I even saw a nasty comment saying Sarah and my husband would be the office power couple. How can you sit here and say nothing's going on? You claim my husband didn't cheat and I'm being crazy, yet in the same breath, wish they would get together? You're contradicting yourself, because deep down you know something romantic was developing. Now for the update. My husband came to my mother-in-law's house. She didn't call him. He knew I was there because I told him, and he said he wanted to talk. Some big things happened in such a short time. He wanted to explain. According to my husband, after I left, he started to reflect. He did call his mom, and they had a long talk. I didn't know any of this. She asked him if he was happy with me, and he said yes, but I made him extremely happy. I was a good wife, and a great partner. This is kind of what sunk into him that he was being juvenile for wanting attention from another woman. I did ask him why he always brushed things off, and never took action before. He said he couldn't explain it. It just felt good. He assured me he never wanted to sleep with her, and never advance things that way. It was just nice having someone around who was fawning over him, like a fan. For those who said he didn't know what an emotional affair was, and was just agreeing with me, you were right. He admitted he didn't really understand what an emotional affair was, but after looking it up, he agreed that's what it was, though unintentional. He said he didn't want to lose his friend, so he just went along with a lot of what she did. He admitted he was deep into a fog, but me leaving, and this conversation with his mom, was the one thing that brought him out of it. He said he didn't want to fight. My husband is big on giving me my space, so when I left, he didn't chase after me, because he thought it would be best for us to just cool down and think about this, and hopefully discuss it more rationally. He did reach out to Sarah. Though they didn't meet in person, they had a phone call. He told her they couldn't remain as close, that their out-of-office texts and calls needed to stop, that he would get a replacement mug she wasn't to touch, and that they needed to cut back on their lunches. He wanted to handle this before talking to me, to show he was serious. Sarah didn't take it well. She started berating me, saying I was forcing him to do this. My husband stopped her and said no. He was doing this because his marriage was important. He admitted letting things go too far, but clarified he had no romantic interest in her. He told her if she had feelings for him, she needed to distance herself immediately. Sarah ended up ruining their friendship herself. Though my husband was willing to maintain a more distant friendship, her comments about me and him, claiming she'd never want him, and that everything she did was because she knew we weren't meant to be together, and she was trying to open his eyes. He said he couldn't believe he'd never seen how vindictive and awful she was. She was almost venomous. It didn't end well. After handling that situation, he came to see me, wanting to ensure I knew he understood and was taking the proper steps. He said we could do whatever I needed. I know some of you will say, I'm wrong. That divorce is the only option because he had an emotional affair. I'm sorry to disappoint you, but I'm not divorcing my husband. I told him we needed counseling for both of us. Yes, going through all his devices, emails, and texts might have been extreme. He agreed it felt like a breach of privacy, but understood given the circumstances. I told him we both needed to work on things. As of right now, I guess you could say that we're separated. We're not staying in the same house. We're going to attend counseling. I don't want to just jump back into things with him. I don't want it to seem like it was okay to make me feel like I was the second option, to ignore all those red flags, and to brush me off. This has to be worked on. I'm leaving his mother's house and staying with a friend. I'm not sure if anyone's going to want an update after this. Sorry. It's so anticlimactic. Sorry. It's typical. Oh, you just got back together. I mean, it is, but it isn't. I love my husband. I know he loves me. I don't think everything is an end-all be-all. Yes. It's a terrible situation. Yes. He did a terrible thing, but I want my marriage to last, so we're giving it another go. I genuinely hope this is my last update, but if it's not, y'all will know. Thank you for all the messages. All the support for everything really has been a huge help. Top comments. Comment 1. Honestly, this was the update I was hoping for. I'm happy he recognized it, and that you two are working for your marriage. All the best, and I hope your marriage is stronger after this episode. Comment 2. Glad to hear that the fog is lifting. I hope he sticks to his word and distances himself from Sarah. I would even involve HR to let them know what is going on, in case she gets vindictive and tries to cause trouble at work. I'm happy to hear that you're proceeding cautiously. I hope everything goes well for you in the end. Third update. Update 3. February 18th, 2025. 4 days from previous update, but removed due to posting too many updates. Hi Reddit. We are continuing our work-wife saga. As a lot of you predicted in my last update, Sarah wasn't happy about my husband ending their friendship and trying to put a distance between him and her. I seriously thought she was going to reach out to me, but she never did. Why? Because this was never about me. I was not even on her radar, except for somebody to tear down. I will give Sarah one thing. She is extremely efficient. She started her campaign long before Monday morning. Over the weekend, she reached out to several of my husband's coworkers, mostly male. She told them that my husband had randomly stopped being friends with her, and she suspected it was my fault. She said she couldn't believe it. Everyone knew how close they were. She just felt bad for him, wanted to be a friend for him, and hopefully help him out of our terrible marriage. She went on and on about how she couldn't believe how much this is going to affect her during her working hours, and that she didn't know if she can continue working at this job. One of the female workers at my husband's job messaged me all of this. As a lot of you predicted, she is gearing up to accuse my husband of sexual harassment. Monday alone, she has put herself in the path of my husband multiple times. It kind of feels like she's setting up to do something, and he said she had an argument because she's doing a lot of odd things. At least, according to my husband. Think stuff like intentionally following my husband into a room or a section of the office that is somewhat closed off, accidentally emailing him or forwarding him things, going to his cubicle multiple times a day for no reason, sitting close to him in meetings. It seems harmless, but really it feels like she's gearing up for something. My husband did go to HR first thing Monday morning, and I kind of thought they pretty much said they can't do anything unless it affects work or working hours. His HR is not the greatest. He did let them know what she was doing today, but honestly, I don't think they took him seriously. We've been thinking about moving. The only thing that keeps us here is really his mom. So he might just transfer jobs? We're not really sure. I hope things don't escalate anymore. And since he went to HR already, I'm hoping that nothing big happens. I'd like to give a little update about our counseling to all the people who tell me that I'm making a mistake by giving my husband another chance and trying to work it out. I am so happy. I don't listen to you. I understand it was a shitty situation. I lived through it. I know it is. I know how it felt. But counseling has revealed a lot about my husband that I didn't even know. Apparently, he was bullied severely in high school, and he kind of went through a little glow up when he went into college. Sarah is definitely one of those stereotypical blonde pretty girls, and my husband admits that it did kind of feel like he finally got his chance to be popular in a social setting. My husband admitted that Sarah basically mirrored everything about him. He likes his dislikes. She talked to him like he walked on water. It definitely sounded like she was boosting his ego in a manipulative fashion. Like I said, I understand this isn't just a forgive and move on kind of situation. But hearing my husband talk about how it felt the way it affected him, it made me have a lot more sympathy for him. I still haven't come back home, but we're doing it one day at a time. I went and had lunch with him on Monday, and I'm going again today. I'm trying to be there for him so he doesn't feel alone. I'm really ready for all this to die down. I'm hoping it doesn't get taken farther at work, but if it does, we'll deal with it. Oh. P. Your husband should be documenting everything in writing as it occurs, and then provide it to management. In addition, a consultation and possible engagement of a seasoned labor law employment attorney. My stepdaughter's prank went too far, causing a major conflict in our family. Now, my marriage and relationship with her may never be the same. I know the title sounds bad, but please read in throwaway plus fake names. I 38 million married Judd, 44 feet, a few years ago, and I acquired a stepdaughter, Abby, 14 feet, as a result. I dated Judd when Abby was 8, met her when she was 9, and married Judd when she was 10. I'd say our relationship is okay. She doesn't act bratty towards me and respects me enough as her mom's husband. However, there is one glaring issue about her, and that is her pranking nature. Abby loves to pull pranks. Some examples are her hiding my car keys with what looked like 100 doves in a box. I found them quickly because she failed to notice my keys have duct tape on them. Another one is when she hid in the fridge, something I still find very weird, to scare the first person who opened it. Well, last Wednesday, I arrived home and it seemed that I was the only one there. Only my shoes were at the doorstep, and I even called out Judd's and Abby's names with no answer. This is somewhat normal, as Judd sometimes works late, and Abby stays at school for extracurriculars. So I screwed around with my dog, a German Shepherd and Husky mix for anyone that will ask, for a bit, and then I decided to relieve myself. When I got to the bathroom, I noticed that the window cabinet was open. I thought nothing of it at first, and unzipped my pants, but then I saw a shadow behind the shower curtains. I thought the worst, and immediately punched the figure behind the curtains. Well, as everyone may have guessed from the title, it was Abby. She was making a prank video, and I had not noticed that she propped her phone up on the bathroom cabinet with 2 cups. I'm not gonna lie, I did not hold back. I punched her as hard as I could. Her nose looked broken, and when I realized it, I flipped out, and so did she. After maybe 5 minutes of freaking out, I drove her to urgent care and informed Judd of the situation. Her nose was indeed broken and would need about 6 to 12 weeks of recovery. Abby won't talk to me, and as for Judd, she thinks that my action may have been justified, but also thinks I should have approached with more caution, which she has refused to elaborate on. So AITA comments. Comment 1. NTA. Get a copy of the video. If Abby starts bitching to people about how her stepdad broke her nose, you are looking at jail time. Get and keep a copy of the evidence that she startled you while you were peeing. You need to sit Judd and Abby down and have a serious conversation. Filming without consent while someone is in the bathroom is a massive invasion of privacy and illegal in many places. If she did this to another kid, it could be considered child PRN. While you are in the bathroom, you feel vulnerable with having your pants down, genitals out. Those feelings increase the fight-flight part of the brain, and that you react on instinct. Please tell Abby that you love her and never meant to hurt her. Comment 2. And why would a young girl think pranking her stepfather in the bathroom is ever a good idea? She should at least be talked to about pranking anyone in the bathroom, especially with a video. Comment 3. This is so unfortunate. People get killed for this. She's lucky she's alive. That's the normal reaction to fight. As messed up this is stuck firmly because this is a life lesson. Play stupid games and win stupid prizes. Fortunately, it's all on tape, right? So you're protected. What she did is actually what's unforgivable. Her dumb antics are gonna get someone killed or put in jail. Her mother needs to address this. Not one more prank ever. Comment 4. How stupid does a 14-year-old have to be to not know that recording someone in the bathroom without their consent is a very bad idea? And what was the stupid prank? Boo, I scared you, so I'm gonna put your reaction and pee-pee on social media. NTA, but you might want to get legal advice lawyer before a false and more sinister version gets circulated. Comment 5. As a teacher, I can say that 14-year-olds are indeed very uninformed. Had a 14-year-old once who took 30 minutes to go to the bathroom. When he finally came back, because he was a kid who didn't usually cause trouble, and I was worried. I privately asked, what the heck took so long? His response? I was waiting for people to leave the bathroom. I still didn't get it. So, he elaborated. If you use a stall, you're probably trying to shit, or do something that you need privacy for. And other people will see your feet under the stall and try to film you by putting their phones over the walls of the stall. I started requiring that students trade their phones for the hall pass. After that, also told the administration, but they didn't do anything. Point is, yes, teenagers are that uninformed that behavior like this doesn't click as being problematic. Update. 12 days later. Well, this blew up big time. Let's address a few things. Abby's pranking nature isn't just situated on me. She has pulled pranks on her friends, the neighbors, and at school. The school has called Judd several times about this, as they have resulted in mild vandalism. The refrigerator prank. She was 11 when that happened, not a grown teenager. It was a brand new and very large fridge that my uncle bought it and showed it off to everyone. So she climbed in until he opened it again. Judd yelled at her, saying that she could have suffocated in there, and took her outside to scold her for a few hours. The video itself. The video doesn't show the toilet at all, just the shower curtain. However, the issue still remains that this was a massive invasion of privacy. The video has been deleted, and Abby has admitted it was purely her fault. The update. It's been a chaotic week. Judd still refused to elaborate on how the situation should have been handled. I showed the post as a result, and she did a 180 turn. She suddenly thought it may be time to stage an intervention, and I agreed. We brought some of her friends as well as my cousin's wife, Jess. Jess is an officer from another state, and Abby seems to respect her. In this intervention, we state how we were each affected by her various pranks, and how in turn they affected her. Jess also spoke about how much of these pranks border on criminal territory, meaning she could be arrested or face retaliation. It seemed to have gotten to her, and Abby cried a bit, and promised to do better. When everybody else left, Jess stayed behind, and brought to our attention about a disciplinary camp that we could send her to. The program is 6 weeks long, and involves group therapy, individual therapy, and constructive projects. Whatever that means, and is held at a university campus. The program apparently has good reviews. Judd seems dead set in sending her to figure out her core problems. I'm a little hesitant about sending a kid away from home, but I'm the step-parent, so I got no say. Edit. Update. Okay. I swear Judd must be following my posts, because now she's taking back what she said, and is now thinking about doing what I and you fellow Redditors suggested in the first place, weekly therapy. So we agreed that I'm gonna find a therapist, and I'm gonna front the bill for it since she didn't take this seriously in the first place. Comments. Comment 1. The program apparently has good reviews. Try to get more than just reviews. The troubled teen industry is pretty horrifying. There's a troubled teen subreddit for survivors. It's brutal. Oop, I'm aware, that's why I'm hesitant about this. Comment 2. Oh, thank God. I'm glad you're aware of the troubled teen industry. My heart sank so low when I read that your friend was suggesting it. Maybe it's legit, but I do feel it's a bit of an extreme response. Abby seems like a mostly good kid, who just has this one stupid thing that's got stuck in her brain. Normal teen stuff. I find it interesting that Judd did a 180 after reading a post, and now seems to be going from one extreme to the other. No real punishment to all punishment. I would think a bit more about that. I realize you're a step-parent, and likely have no say in how Abby is parented, but I find it very concerning that your wife seems to be so easily influenced by outsiders. Honestly, if Abby's able to keep to her word too, if not end her pranks entirely, at least tone it down, I'd say you're all in the clear. Maybe suggest to Judd that you keep this program in reserve, in case she needs it, and that she has a chance to prove she's learned her lesson first. Comment 3. Sent away seems extreme. Have you looked into this program? Is it held at a religious college? She might just end up abused at some of these types of teen rehabilitation camps, and also just exposed to kids that are worse. I realize it might not be your call, but I would suggest try local therapy first way before sending a kid off. Oh, okay. And I agree. Sending a kid away from home will probably just damage them more. But Judd seems intent on dishing out the harshest punishment, immediately thinking that this will nip it at the bud. Or she doesn't want to be seen as an enabler. She changed opinions real fast when I showed her the original post. New update. 7 months later. Well, it's been 7-ish months, and there have been a few developments. Let's address some more things before getting there. Up until recently, I have been still getting DMs asking why is this brat still in my house? Why am I friends with Jess? And why did I name my wife Judd in my posts? I was drinking when I made my first post. I saved the draft and went back to it after a few hours of sobering up, fixing a bunch of grammatical mistakes, but clearing some got overlooked, and it just stuck. I was planning on calling her Judy. Jess and I are not friends. She is married to my cousin, who I do have a good relationship with, as well as their 2 daughters and Jess's daughter. Jess has a serious problem with boundaries. As for why Abai was still living with me, you have to understand. I, her stepfather, broke a B's, my stepdaughter's, nose. If word got out, it would look really bad. I would be seen as an abuser and may have even been arrested. Several comments have pointed out how I should have saved that video for my own safety. I was pretty much going insane at that point, and my wife thought nothing of it, thinking I should have just let this go until I showed her my original post. To be honest, I wanted to keep the intervention that we had smaller, that didn't involve her friends, because I felt they did not need to know about it. I just wanted her grandparents and Jess to show up, but I was convinced otherwise. Update. We decided that we would send Abby to weekly therapy. We were under the agreement that I would find and pay for it, and if it worked, my wife would pay me back. It did work. Abby improved by a lot. She has realized how much damage she has done and is working to improve things. She has even begun to do volunteer work as well, which I didn't think she would do. She has apologized profusely, realizing how disgusting her prank was. She has also deleted her TikTok account, claiming that's where she got all the ideas from. We decided we would get her a new smartphone for her birthday 3 months ago, for the improvement she's shown. We took away all smart devices as punishment. I don't think I mentioned that before. As for me and my wife, I gave her an ultimatum. Since therapy worked for Abby, it would be time we go to couples therapy, or else we separate. We were having problems before this whole incident showed up, and now it kinda has to be forced. Past 2 years, we've been living more like roommates, and her enabling behavior is finally causing things to fall apart. She reluctantly agreed. It ended up being short-lived. She spoke during our sessions how I take things out of proportion, and I went too far posting the incident online. She revealed that she was indeed following my posts, and that's why she changed her mind about the camp. Our therapist then asked us both if we loved each other at all. I was honest and said yes, but it's becoming difficult. My wife, on the other hand, said she was in love with the idea of me. I needed a minute, if I heard that right, and she went on how I was apparently a catch. I was younger than her, had a stable job, and owned a house, and she thought my loyalty was a bonus. I don't why, but I asked her if she cheated on me, and she said no, but it doesn't matter. She just revealed that she settled for me. I filed for divorce 2 months ago. We had a prenup, so things are going smoothly, other than her erroneously claiming some jewelry is hers. But my lawyer seems to think that it should be finalized within 1 to 2 months. So my Bex has moved out along with Abby. My dog misses them. She just sits by the door waiting for hours for them to come back. Bex is not happy about how things have progressed. She has been calling me a spineless bastard who couldn't just tolerate how things are, and has been saying to everyone who will listen. But behind closed doors, she's been blaming Abby for her divorce, claiming it was her behavior that caused it. I know this because she has called me and texted me semi-regularly. Abby is living with her grandparents because apparently her mother can't deal with her right now. I actually liked my in-laws. They were real good people, and they apologized for their daughter's actions, and even offered to reimburse me for Abby therapy sessions. They told me that they were going to take care of Abby because it seems her mother has finally lost it. I spoke with Abby and assured her that this wasn't her fault. Chances are we were going to divorce regardless. She then told me that she didn't want me to leave and that I was the closest thing to father she ever had. This surprised me. I never really saw myself as a parental figure for Abby. I only really did the minimal. Outside of that, I just paid for school events, supplies, and would carve out some time for her, but I did leave it up to her if she wanted to spend time with me. I told her that maybe, when she turns 18, we can pick up where we left off, but until then, I don't think we can see each other. Her mother would definitely try to keep her away from me, and to be honest, I need some time away from Abby as well. Things are so quiet at home that it's relaxing. So there you go. I don't even care if my CBX finds this post. TLDR. Sent Abby to therapy. It worked, but now me and her mother are divorcing, and things are just falling apart. Comments. Comment 1. I figured this was where this was headed. Good for you. You deserve better, OP. And congrats on being smart enough to get a prenup. Oh, you know, when I brought up the prenup, she was hesitant, and took about 4 months to get her to sign it. Guess that alone should have screen problems. Comment 2. So your ex-wife didn't get the idea that if she loved you and invested in being more than a roommate, you two would still be married? Like, what's the deal here? To your ex, not you. Advice. Get your dog another dog to be busy. He will forget them at some point. Might also search for a dog daycare somewhere so he can meet other pet friends. Oop. Honesty. I think she is just incapable of forming a relationship beyond a superficial one at this point. As for my dog, I did hire a dog walker for her during the day after they moved out. Guess I'll look into doggy daycare too. Dad favored my sister, but was rejected. I chose my brother to walk me down the aisle and witnessed karma hit him hard. Dad wanted to take my sister down the aisle first, but she chose our stepdad, so he declined to walk me down the aisle. Dad is crying now and pleading with me to let him. Although I've never been a particularly vindictive person, I do enjoy it when karma is presented in a palpable manner, which is what has occurred. I don't care if that makes me a bad person or a lousy daughter. I couldn't be happier or more arrogant about the whole thing. After years and years of pain and emotional abuse, I am overjoyed to have finally seen justice. My father has made me feel awful as I've grown up. He suddenly remembers this daughter of his that he never really liked in the first place, now that he has no one else to rely on. Out of my 3 siblings, I, 31, am the middle one. Sarah, 29, is my younger sister, and Finn, 37, is my older brother. We were a happy family for the majority of my upbringing. At least my mom, 59, did her best to be an equal parent, even though my parents had their preferences. My father, M65, is not in the same boat. Favoritism was clearly visible in his actions. His favorite person was Sarah, and since Finn was the son, he naturally felt a connection with him, and they could bond over man things. I was, of course, left out of this dynamic. It began at a very young age. I've always had the impression that my father didn't think highly of me. I made a few attempts to express it, maybe by throwing fits, because I was a challenging kid overall. But nothing I ever did got his attention. As I grew older, I came to terms with it. I believe Mom tried to make up for his partiality after noticing it, because I would have remained invisible my entire life if it had been up to my father. I have always adored her for seeing me. Mom did her best to be an equitable parent, but as I mentioned, she was not flawless. She treated us the same, and loved us equally. I believe Finn noticed that she made an effort to keep me from feeling excluded. He attempted to fill in after noticing my neglect and my tendency to be distant. When Finn was learning how to change automobile tires, he would ask Dad if I could come along. When Dad taught him how to drive, he made sure I was present. Dad didn't involve me in the chats, so I know it was him. I didn't experience abuse or anything similar. We received similar gifts if they gave them to us. For example, I received as many new outfits as either Sarah or Finn. However, Dad never provided me with any emotional support. Mom and Finn attempted to fill that void in my life for all that time. Sarah, on the other hand, simply enjoyed playing the role of the young princess. She was a snobby child, and her attitude caused her school to raise various concerns. In some way, all of those worries were ignored. She developed into a very demanding and conceited young lady. I am not really close to her as a result. I'm really close to Finn, and he simply can't bear Sarah. Dad is the only one who does not find her behavior problematic. Mom barely puts up with her either. This is the current situation. Mom and Dad split about a decade ago. We have all been kept in the dark about the true reason for the friendly breakup. We all know that Mom and Dad's claim that they are no longer compatible is untrue. Something else is the true cause. Since none of them began dating someone new for a long period after the divorce, I am very sure it wasn't infidelity. We all still don't know the truth, and Mom and Dad have always wanted to keep it that way. There was no custody issue to deal with because we were all adults at the time. Since then, they've generally gotten along well. Since, let's face it, there's no love lost there. I have personally opted to avoid seeing Dad as much as possible. I suppose it works for both of us, because he hasn't voiced any complaints about my absence. When I have free time, I usually visit Mom's house, although Finn and Sarah split their time equally between the 2 locations. We never go with Sarah, unless it's for Christmas, but Finn and I occasionally plan our trips to Mom's house. Finn simply cannot tolerate her. When viewed from the outside, we appear to be rather normal and functional. But for once, I am glad that things have taken a turn for the worse. Mom began dating Arthur, 65 years ago. They clicked right away after meeting at a yoga retreat. My time with Arthur is enjoyable, and he is a cool guy. He never tries to push limits, and is kind to Finn and myself. Since nobody has ever mentioned it, and I don't see any justification for him to treat Sarah badly, I'm going to presume that everything is well between them. All that matters is that Mom is happy. Even though Dad is very combative with Arthur, they have a friendly relationship. I believe it's because Dad doesn't have a steady partner, and his dating life hasn't been very successful. In addition, Mom's life is opulent in comparison to her life with Dad, and Arthur makes a lot more money than Dad does. We are all pleased for Mom, but I believe Dad is really resentful of the whole thing. The fact that we get along well with Arthur is another thing he dislikes. Dad still acts envious despite Finn's attempts to explain that none of us are taking his place, and that we are simply acting like responsible adults in this scenario. All of it is very offensive and childish. Fortunately, since I don't see Dad very often, I don't have to deal with a lot of it. The dynamics of the family are as follows at the moment. Understanding the backdrop is crucial to comprehending the events of the past few days. My fiancée, Karen, 34, proposed to me a few months ago. We've spent a lot of time together. I prefer to stay private, therefore, I didn't make the engagement public right away. After choosing the date, Karen and I informed our family since we wanted to get married as soon as possible, and avoid a lengthy engagement period. 1 week from now, the wedding is planned. My family's response when I told them was conflicted. Arthur was pleased, and Finn and Mom were ecstatic. Sarah appeared pretty unhappy, but Dad's response was fairly neutral. All of this took place during a video call, and I could see that she quickly ended the call after forcing a grin. She detests not being the center of attention, so I was expecting some sort of tantrum. But at that moment, I couldn't stand her theatrics. I informed Finn that I wanted him to be the one to escort me down the aisle, not Dad, and I called him separately to gossip. He remained silent for a time, and claimed that although he was deeply moved by my request, he believed it was improper to fulfill, and that Dad would make a big deal out of it. He claimed that although he would really like to, he was unable to do so since he didn't want to annoy his father. He said something that hurt me. He understood that I needed him to be there with me, since he had been my male protector far more than Dad, and I informed him that I had come to him because I had been let down by Dad on multiple occasions. I hate to say it, but I also felt Finn was making sense, so I didn't argue with him about it. It was an emotional conversation. Gently, he assured me that it didn't matter if he escorted me down the aisle. It was crucial that my day be as uneventful as possible, so that I could look back on it with joy and no resentment. If he were to assume Dad's position, he claimed, Dad would remain agitated during the ceremony and spoil the day and the memories for me. He was correct. I knew what Finn said would make my day simpler, if not perfect, and Dad was more than capable of pulling off such a ruse. Finn advised me to discuss it with Dad. I stated I would give it some thought and that I was hesitant to have him escort me down the aisle. Fortunately, Sarah and her boyfriend Zach announced their engagement 2 weeks later. After exchanging glances with Kieran, I knew she would try to steal the show at my wedding or do something else, but I couldn't help myself. Finn was also not very pleased. We were both aware of the timing, but we were unable to change it, so we kept quiet. One positive outcome of this is that Sarah's wedding is scheduled for approximately 5 weeks from now, 1 month after mine. The stars didn't align in her favor, so she had to be content to be the second bride in the family, even though she had really wanted to marry before me. I resisted her attempts to guilt me into delaying my wedding, even though she was rather sour about it. She needed to grow up since I wasn't the type to give in to her whims. Thus, things remained unchanged. But it seems that Dad and Sarah agreed that he would accompany her down the aisle before he did the same for me. I'm not really sure how they came up with something that strange. Since I never had much luck with boys in school or college, I suppose they figured I wouldn't get married, or would get married later. In any case, once Sarah announced her engagement, I requested Dad to accompany me down the aisle. He sadly informed me that he had promised his baby that he would accompany her first. Years ago, while she was on her deathbed, which never materialized, he said he had made that commitment. Now, he wouldn't be able to lead me down the aisle, because he couldn't break his word and break her heart. To be honest, I was thrilled, because I didn't want him to accompany me down the aisle in the first place. I was dancing within, as I feigned sadness and hurt. I assured him that even if it hurt, it didn't. I would accept his vow to Sarah because I respected it. I called Finn right away and informed him of the situation. He was upset with his father. Finn stated that he would have seized the chance to accompany me down the aisle immediately if he had known Dad would act in this manner. He said that I could choose whatever daughter I wanted to grant this privilege to, if Dad could. I was too delighted to care if Finn was upset with Dad. In the end, it had turned out to be just what I had desired, and I am overjoyed. Despite the pressure of wedding planning, everything was going smoothly. Up until yesterday, when unheard of drama entered my life, drama for which I lacked the stamina. Everything looked to be in order, despite my jitteriness and nervousness. Sarah told her father last night that he would not be accompanying her to the wedding. She requested Arthur to do it instead. We were all surprised by this. Not only that, she announced it via video call. She could have been more tactful about it, and it was cruel. We were all aware of Dad's excitement for her wedding. Because she and her fiancé wanted to save money for the honeymoon, he had even covered the entire cost. Dad had nearly mentally checked out of my life, and Mom and Dad were busy organizing 2 weddings. Since all of his attention was on Sarah, he had nothing to contribute or recommend, and continued to show no interest in anything pertaining to my wedding. Furthermore, he had not made any financial contributions to my wedding. We were paying for it ourselves, Kieran and I. It had gotten to the point where I was depending more on Mom and Arthur's advice than on Dad's. In contrast to Sarah, Arthur was actively involved in my wedding preparations. Because of this, even Arthur appeared surprised by Sarah's request, or rather her demand, and was unsure of how to react. When Mom finally stated that Arthur would love to do it, he continued to stare at her. I work in corporate, where terrible calls are almost a given, but that had to be one of the worst calls I've ever been on. Dad was crying. He began cursing out Arthur instead of discussing it with Sarah, and then hung up. And that was all. I didn't ask Dad how he was feeling, but I'm sure the others did. I quickly hung up the phone, since I had too many other things to think about. Besides, this wasn't my problem. He didn't want to renege on the commitment he had made to Sarah. It was between them if she broke it. I didn't want or intend to step in. They were able to resolve it among themselves. I wasn't interested in becoming involved in trivial family matters at this time. I had no idea that it would soon cause me great annoyance. A few hours after his little princess dealt him a heartbreaking blow, Dad called me last night in tears. On the phone, he was crying and telling me that he would love to walk me down the aisle now, and that he was foolish for turning down my offer. I was shocked by what I heard. It was astonishing how entitled they were. Although I was sorry for what had transpired, I gently explained to him that it was between him and Sarah. It had no bearing whatsoever on my wedding plans. I informed him that this had been decided months prior, and that Finn was escorting me down the aisle. I also informed him that I was unable to make a last-minute modification. He promised to speak with Finn, saying that I didn't need to be concerned about Finn's disagreement, because Finn was merely a placeholder for him. I explained to him that I didn't want to hurt Finn, not that he agreed. Dad didn't need to know that I didn't want him to be my father in the first place. I informed Dad that no swap was taking place, despite his insistence that he speak with Finn and make amends. The final step was for Finn to lead me down the aisle. He believed I was resisting because Finn wouldn't resign, and he was living in total denial. He was sure he could persuade Finn not to do it. After hanging up, I called Finn right away to let him know what was happening. It would be an understatement to say that Finn was furious. I informed him that I had always wanted him to be the one to reveal my identity when he asked what I wanted. Only at his encouragement did I ask Dad in the first place, and he was the first person I had asked. I replied in the affirmative. When Finn asked if I was certain I wanted him to lead me down the aisle, then he assured me that if Dad phoned him, he would correct him, and that I shouldn't worry about anything. Since his favorite had sent him out, I told Finn that I didn't want any drama at the wedding, and that Dad needed to realize that he couldn't just walk in anytime he wanted and use me as a stand-in daughter. Finn reassured me that there would be no alteration to the wedding arrangements, and that he would make sure Dad knew about it. I haven't spoken to one of them since last evening. I'm getting so anxious about it. I truly don't have the energy to handle this turmoil at this time, and everything was going smoothly. I'm not sure if I should get in touch with them, or hold off until I find out what transpired between Finn and Dad. I'm not even sure whether Finn has had a conversation with him yet. The anxiousness is making me queasy, and I'm at a loss for what to do. Update 1. Finn and I eventually spoke, and the situation is a complete mess, even worse than I had anticipated. Fortunately, he has taken care of the majority of it, so I won't have any issues. Finn claimed that he had been expecting a call from Dad to talk about the alleged change in plans, but the call never arrived. Finn recognized then that Dad was not going to talk about anything. Dad reasoned that since he had made the decision to accompany me down the aisle, everyone else must have agreed. After waiting a day for Dad to get in touch, Finn called him. Because I had mentioned something, he asked Dad if the arrangements had changed. In an attempt to appear casual, Dad said that because Sarah would no longer be walking me down the aisle, I had requested him to do so. Now Finn, the more reasonable and level-headed of the three of us, is typically diplomatic. I was shocked to hear that he went completely crazy on Dad. Finn claimed that since they both knew I hadn't requested Dad to accompany me down the aisle, he urged him to stop being so rude. Rather, Dad had pleaded for the part after his beloved daughter had turned him down. Dad was enraged to hear this. When faced with the truth or anything he doesn't want to hear, he has a tendency to react violently. Finn, however, told Dad to stop talking and listen for once before he could interfere. Finn stated that considering how he had treated me over the years, Dad should be thankful that he was even receiving an invitation to my wedding. Then Finn relaxed. He later expressed regret to me for snapping at Dad, particularly so near the wedding, but he said he was unable to control himself. Finn longed for Dad to see his true self and shed the mask he was wearing. Finn admitted to Dad that he had always given preference to Sarah and had, at most, tried to get along with Finn, but I was never given any thought. In addition, he brought up the fact that I had requested Finn to accompany me down the aisle. I had only asked Dad at first because of Finn's persistence. Finn stated that he had thought Dad would use the occasion to begin repairing our relationship, but Dad squandered his opportunity. Finn said that none of his kids liked or respected Dad, calling him a failure of a father. Because Finn wasn't a fair parent, he didn't respect him. He never made an effort to love me or treat me like his daughter. Therefore, I didn't respect him. Sarah also didn't respect him since she wouldn't have pulled the prank she did if she did. Finn went on to claim that Dad was the source of Sarah's conceited demeanor. After years of lavishing her with attention, he was now having to deal with the fallout. Finn claimed that since Dad had been throwing out his other children since they were born, it was only fitting that his favorite child would throw out his favorite. Finn told me that although he didn't remember everything because he had shouted in a blinding passion, he did admit that he had spoken more. He reassured me that I didn't have to be concerned about Dad pulling any tricks after he got a harsh reality check, and Finn would take care of it right away if he did. Finn also clarified that the plans remained unchanged. He wouldn't alter the fact that he would be the one to lead me down the aisle. I was more than grateful that he apologized for the drama so close to the wedding. I've never been able to defend myself with such strength in my life. I always believed that I might have done something wrong for Dad to not love me. Over the years, I made an effort to get over that emotion, but I was never successful. Here I had my brother standing up for me, which I never thought anyone would do. When we were children, my mother ought to have defended me, but she didn't. She never challenged Dad, but she made an effort to compensate for the lack of affection in her own manner. Her diffidence and deference to him gave me the impression that I would never be able to confront him about how awful he was to me, though I don't blame her for it. But only because my brother loved me so much that he could no longer stand the idea of my going through this did that change. I was choking when I told him that this was the most beautiful thing anyone had ever done for me, and I was crying by the time he finished recounting the entire episode. It must be the greatest thing I could ever hope for, but I doubt Finn understands the extent of what he has done. Second update. I'm married now. In fact, Kieran and I are presently enjoying our honeymoon in Thailand after getting married a few days ago. Despite some turmoil beforehand, the wedding went off without a hitch. Dad couldn't walk even one daughter down the aisle, and Finn wasn't going to back down. The situation has become really bad. Dad was primarily worried about how his extended family would perceive him if he did not attend the weddings of both children. During his conversation with Finn, he kept returning to this subject. Once more, Finn bluntly informed him that he was emotionally checked out with me anyway. Thus, he was missing the role of father at least for my wedding. Finn advised him to express gratitude for the invitation in the first place. Since Sarah was his favorite, Dad could only wonder what went wrong with her, and no one truly knows why she did what she did. When word came out, Sarah had the gall to phone me and claimed that it was unjust to Dad, and that I wanted him to walk me down the aisle because she couldn't. Since she was using Dad's money to pay for her wedding and had expelled him, I encouraged her to have a life. I informed her that I had visited Dad, and that due to some foolish pledge she was unable to keep, he had decided to accompany her down the aisle. She was more than welcome to change things up at her wedding if she was so offended by her beloved father's misery. Since she was feeling awful about Dad, I assured her that Arthur would understand and that I could even speak with him on her behalf. She ended the call, since she had nothing more to say. Before the wedding, I called Finn and informed him that I didn't want to be involved in any more father drama. If it came to me, it was his duty to make sure I was finished with this bullshit. I couldn't allow Dad to ruin my day because I had 100 other things to be happy about or worried about. I couldn't allow him to ruin my most memorable day because he had already made me miserable for most of my life. Finn assured me that he would handle everything and that I shouldn't worry. It would be an understatement to say that I was really anxious on my wedding day, but fortunately, everything went smoothly. I'm glad Dad didn't try to start anything, even though he appeared to be rather glum. After a point, I was too preoccupied with having fun to give his pouty face much thought. It was awkward between them, and Sarah tried to avoid Dad as much as possible, but I didn't mind. I'm happy that nobody was able to ruin the wedding because it went off without a hitch. I could feel Dad blaring daggers at my back as Finn led me down the aisle, but that was all he could do. According to what I've been informed, Dad has been left to handle some damage control after a few people questioned why Finn was up there instead of him. That's his cross to carry then. In order to live a peaceful existence and eliminate any possibility of turmoil, I also want Sarah's wedding to be over. I'm going to cut off communication with Dad for the foreseeable future after her wedding. In any case, I don't see the need to keep in contact with him. Update 2. Yesterday was Sarah's wedding. She didn't ask Kieran and me to the wedding, so I wouldn't know how it went. I'm not sure what she was trying to accomplish, but I was more than willing to watch. It was just Mom, Arthur, and Dad there, and to her dismay, Finn did not go either. At the last minute, Dad reportedly hoped she would change her mind and ask him to lead her down the aisle. But that never occurred. It was quite unpleasant, and it's clear from the pictures she shared that Arthur would much rather be somewhere else. Mom is just finished. Dad is glum, and Arthur is uneasy. I don't really care. But aside from that, her wedding went smoothly. I was called up by Mom to provide these details. Naturally, Dad is unhappy because he had hoped that at least one of us would give in and allow him to do as he pleases. Now, however, his personal life is in disarray, and all of his children are essentially cut off from him. I don't care that he isn't handling it well. For being such a bad father to me, allowing me to have a miserable childhood, and even helping to cause it, I genuinely believe it serves him right. I've had enough of him, and I don't want Sarah's or his poison to affect this new stage of my life or my new family. I'm relieved they're no longer in my life. Parents demand I cancel my wedding for sister's engagement, but the truth about her cheating changed everything. Engaged to my fiancé, Jake, 30 million. I, a 28-year-old lady, have been for roughly 8 months. Up until last week, when my parents shocked us. Our October wedding was scheduled, and all was going according to plan. For background, Mia, 25. Our younger sister has always been the golden child in our family. She has been seeing Tom, 26 million, her lover, for around 2 years. In practically every sphere of our existence, my parents have always showered Mia with royal care. Though I hate to sound negative, I have always felt as though hers dominates my successes. Mia was a cheerleader, while I was a student playing on the volleyball team back in high school. Her achievements always seemed to eclipse all mine. Not to get me wrong, cheerleading merits just as much respect as any other sport. But would it have killed my parents to exhibit the same fervor for my events? I grew used to my absent parents and learned to expect almost little from them. I thus cut myself off from Mia. Though deep down I knew it wasn't her responsibility, my immature self blamed Mom for everything. My viewpoint altered only in college. When I met Jake, the love of my life, he let me see that I deserved just as much attention as everyone else, and was deserving of affection. Jake showed me that every one of us is unique in our own right, and that should someone not value my accomplishments, well, that is their loss. I also realized that it was unfair to hold Mia totally responsible when our parents were clearly in charge. I thus resolved to try to rebuild whatever sisterly relationship we still had. I started letting her know she could talk to me about anything, and checking up on her more often. She first hesitated naturally, but she soon grew more at ease sharing with me. We discussed practically anything, regardless of its silliness or gravity. Though our tastes and paths of life were different, I was glad our connection was getting better gradually. We seemed to be, at last, the sisters we ought to have been all along. Mia knew first when Jake proposed to her, telling me she couldn't wait to help arrange my wedding. She was as eager as I was. Everything seemed ideal at that point. I was therefore really taken aback when my mother called last Wednesday. The call began innocuously enough. Mom inquired about wedding preparations, which was odd, given her previous lack of enthusiasm. I ought to have seen something was wrong. She finally got right to the point after a few minutes of small talk. Mia and Tom were getting engaged. I started to be delighted for my sister as soon as those words emerged from her mouth. Better than this. What could be? Then I noticed Mom had stated, planning to get engaged, which threw me off. Mom said Mia had told her Tom had been hinting at proposing when I asked her what she meant by that. He had done all the other usual things, asked about her ring size, advised her to get a new outfit, and told her. Although these were rather clear indicators, Mia always had a tendency of romanticizing everything and exaggerating events to make them appear more than they really were. I wanted Mia not to have her expectations skyrocketing, only to be let down. When I asked Mom whether she was absolutely convinced Tom was proposing, she answered boldly. That would have marked the end of the call, but another surprise was approaching. One I would not be pleased about. My mother asked me to call off our wedding since Tom and Mia were apparently engaged. I let out a gasp. Though I must have misinterpreted, I asked her to clarify. No. She was dead serious. For 10 months, I had been planning. She wanted me to call off the wedding Jake had proposed. We had waited this long since we wanted the wedding of our dreams and refused to compromise on anything. Deposits for the caterers and other suppliers had already been laid down, not to mention the inconvenience of rearranging things. Moving everything back a year would entail losing a large sum of money. What had descended upon Mom and Dad was unknown to me. When we were short on money, they had volunteered to cover the venue. I assumed this was because they were at last interested in my life. Looking back, it seemed like they did it to challenge Jake's parents. But I was too delighted at the time to pay attention to their hidden agendas. Wait though, This was not even the worst of things. You haven't heard the rationale behind my planned delay of my wedding for Mia's expected engagement. Mom clarified that Mia wanted to be the center of attention for a full year, complete with announcements on social media and engagement pictures. I could not understand at all. Who loses money over something as flimsy as social media and calls their sister off from her wedding? Promising not to post anything about my wedding online, I tried to argue with Mom, but she claimed they would withdraw all the money they had promised for the wedding should I refuse to postpone it. Their lovely daughter was an attention seeker, hence at this time they were virtually blackmailing me. This was ludicrous and unfair, I told my mother. We debated for some time, her arguing that I was being thoughtless of Mia's sentiments and selfish. What about my feelings? I asked repeatedly. Still, I received no meaningful response. She responded simply that they wouldn't pay for the venue should I proceed with the wedding. I got furious. All my life, I gave things up for Mia's sake. Now, when I was at last ready to experience the day of my dreams, that too was being robbed from me. Out of pure annoyance and rage, I did something I never would have done. I contacted Mia's fiancé, Tom, to let him know something about Mia he didn't know. The four of us, Jake and I, Mia and Tom, went on a double date some years ago when everything was good. One of those few times when we all had time to hang around together. I recall being quite content. We laughed, told stories, and for once, everything seemed ideal. Mia and I excused ourselves to the bathroom to freshen at one point throughout the evening. Mia handed me her phone to hold as we corrected our makeup so she could wash her hands. A text message suddenly sprang up on the screen. It came from someone called Mike, wondering whether they might get back together. My heart still missed a beat. Though I heard Mia had dated someone some years ago, I felt he was no more relevant. Not sure I could resist asking, "Who's Mike? And why is he asking to meet again?" Mia started to spin right away. She dismissed it, believing it was nothing, just some old acquaintance extending outreach. Still, I could see her eyes ablaze with dread. I questioned once more whether something was developing between her and Mike. She said she had some texting back and forth, but she insisted it was not major. She shrugged her eyes and replied lightly, "Tom didn't need to know. It's nothing." When I inquired whether Tom knew about this, Tom seemed to be a nice man, totally loving Mia. Though I couldn't get rid of the uncomfortable sensation, I let it pass, since Mia later on told me she was no longer corresponding with her ex. Right then, as Mia was trying to rob me of my bliss, my thoughts went crazy. I lay it all out when I phoned Tom, roughly following the text I had seen that day. And should that not be sufficient, I advised him to monitor his girlfriend. Looking back, I realized this was sort of improper, not the sort of truth I should have been imparting to Tom. Of course, but the way I did it. But already it was too late. I spoke with Tom 2 days ago, and then Mom called. Just say I was glad I wasn't in front of her. She was yelling like a crazed person, as though a tragedy had hit. Her comments really impacted me as I had made a major error. Tom apparently told Mia they needed to talk when phoning her. Mia got all ready, even though she was about to be engaged. But when she at last arrived at the location, Tom was quite irate. He inquired whether that was accurate and reiterated what I had said. Mia first denied it, but she grew angry when Tom wanted to see her phone, telling him he should believe her. Tom split from Mia at last. Mom and Dad never seemed likely to pardon me for this. Mom yelled at me, and I could hear Mia berating me in the backdrop. I kept apologizing, saying I only did this because they insisted I call off my wedding. I told them I had worked very hard on it. Dad's ruling then was that he was taking back the money they had set aside for the venue. I felt as like I had lost everything. My parents, Mia, and any chance for a marriage at that same instant. Given what had happened, I knew Jake would not be pleased with me either. When I attempted phoning Mia to have a conversation, she didn't respond to my calls or texts. At the time, Jake was on a business trip, hence, he was not aware that our wedding was under risk, partially because to me. Though it wasn't entirely my fault, the stress was intolerable, and I felt bad for damaging Mia's relationship. I at last told Jake everything when he returned from his trip. He was quite helpful and encouraged me that we would work things out together. It relieves me. He helped me see that I ought to have done it even earlier, as being honest was the correct thing to do. Regarding the wedding, Jake and I decided to proceed even if it meant lowering expenses. We began generating ideas for financial savings. We contacted relatives and friends, outlining the circumstances and requesting assistance. Unbelievably, one of Jake's pals came to save us. He came upon us at a classy but reasonably priced location via one of his contacts. Given the current situation, we simply have to delay the wedding somewhat more, which is quite okay with me. I was attempting to stay in touch with my parents throughout this. Looking back, I'm not sure why I did this. At the time, I was afraid of being let down. I was living with guilt. Still, they were obstinate, refusing to show up for my wedding if it proceeded as scheduled. The wedding was still under preparation, and despite all the challenges, everything began to fall together. Sadly, many of my family RSVP'd that they would not be going, or responded little at all. I could guess the news had gone without having to be Sherlock. One of my aunts told me Mom and Mia had depicted me as a soap opera villain who lied to undermine her sister's happiness, and could not accept it. They even changed the story, saying Mia was already engaged and preparing to wed. But I later got engaged to take the front stage. Ignoring me was one thing. Lying about my character took effort. By now, I was exhausted. After all that had happened, I couldn't look and feel my best for a wedding. Simultaneously, I struggled to let my parents define me as they had throughout their lifetime. They accused me of being envious and cruel, attributing Mia's life destruction to me. Mia, on the other hand, was in ruins. She hadn't spoken to me since the incident. Hence, even though I knew what I did was appropriate, I felt awful. So I'm asking you, am I the asshole for not postponing my wedding and informing Mia's fiancé of her cheating? Update, I published a few days ago, and the reaction has been really strong. Unbelievably, my parents began talking to me, but not for the reasons you might guess. They insisted that I apologize to Mia and somehow sort things out with Tom. Should I fail, they even threatened to have me disowned. Through all of this, Jake has been rather encouraging, telling me we did the right thing and we should concentrate on our forthcoming wedding. But at last, Mia got back to me. Furious and devastated, she accused me of destroying her life and undermining her happiness out of spite. The talk was challenging. She wasn't open to hearing me try to explain my perspective. She persisted in arguing. Regardless of what she had done, I had no right to meddle in her relationship. I lost my cool and asked her who gave her the right to believe she could influence my wedding plans. Plans that had been in place long before she was almost engaged. She hung up before I could even bring up the lies Mom and she had been telling about me. Meg, a childhood acquaintance I hadn't heard from in years, called me out of the blue when word of the family's strife spread like wildfire. After moving out for college, I had disconnected from Meg, and our only means of contact was social media. But Mia had kept in touch with her for a bit longer. Their friendship reached into their early 20s. Meg also disclosed another startling story concerning Mia's adultery, one that happened around a year ago. Meg's 25th birthday celebration was attended by Mia, without her then-boyfriend Tom, who presumably was on a trip. Meg saw Mia growing more flirty with various male visitors, including her boyfriend. As the evening progressed and practically everyone was intoxicated, Meg first dismissed it. As Mia's usual manner, she had always been a natural flirt. Meg knew, though, she hadn't seen Mia or her partner for some time, as the celebration drew to an end and guests started to leave. Red-handed together in another room, they were caught. Given Mia and Tom had been dating 2 to 3 years at the time, this was very embarrassing. The episode split Meg and Mia and destroyed their friendship. When Meg learned about everything, she assumed I should know that Mia did nothing by mistake. She had become accustomed to this conduct and had somehow always gotten away with it. This fresh material really surprised me. Mia's dishonesty, I came to see, was not a one-time error, but rather a habit. I asked Meg only one favor. Could she kindly forward this news to Tom herself? I was acting for a cause. When my fiancé Jake visited Tom, he was not doing well. Though he didn't say it, I'm sure he was also blaming me for what I had told him. He was second-guessing everything. Better still, if someone else than me delivered this terrible news. I also wanted to avoid feeding the story that I was jealous of Mia. Hence, I didn't want to do this myself. Tom wanted to meet personally to go over things as soon as he received word from Meg. I accepted, expecting for some sort of conclusion or at least clear the air. Tom clearly was in shock from all that had transpired when we met at a neighborhood coffee shop. Meg's disclosure came to him like yet another wave, yet it was welcome to at last know the truth. Tom related how his split from Mia turned out. Mia was right to believe Tom intended to pop the question to her. Following our talk, he challenged Mia about the cheating, and she finally came clean. Though crushed, he valued my candor. He claimed it was preferable to know the truth now than to learn later, maybe following marriage. Tom said he had thought something was awry in their relationship for some time, but couldn't pin it down until I phoned. We spoke for a lengthy period, during which Tom revealed he intended to set aside time for personal healing and life review. Though it hurt, he appreciated me for having the guts to tell him the truth. Knowing I had done the right thing by being truthful with Tom, this chat brought me closure. Still, things with my family have not gotten better. My parents still support Mia. They think I was out of line and must make apologies. Focusing just on Mia's pain and neglecting the fact she cheated, they cannot seem to understand why I did what I did. Friends and relatives who learned about the circumstances have also been quite helpful. Many expressed shock at the way my parents behaved and praised me for defending what was right. Though I have a mixed bag of feelings, I am appreciative of the help from people who see my viewpoint. I'm trying to keep concentrated on the good and keep wedding planning underway. Despite the threats from his parents, Jake and I have decided to carry out our plans. We have changed the budget and are working to create the wedding unique without their financial support. Though I know the drama is not over, I am resolved to stick to my position. I refuse to allow Mia's behavior or the inclination of my parents to define my existence anymore. I have to give my future with Jake top priority and my happiness. Hey everyone. Every moment that passes makes my life seem to get more convoluted. About 4 days following my initial update, events changed dramatically and unexpectedly. Just as I felt the situation could not get worse, it did. Trying to concentrate, I was at work when Jake called urgently. Panicked, he told me to head straight home. Fuming something horrible, I rushed back. When I got here, Jake seemed obviously upset. He handed me a note that had dropped under our door. It came from a lawyer, standing in for my parents. Over the consequences from Mia's failed engagement, they were threatening to sue me for emotional suffering and slanderous remarks. I was astounded. My own parents were suing me. The letter explained how my actions had destroyed Mia's reputation and brought her great emotional suffering. It called for a public apology, a retraction of my remarks on Mia's adultery, and a sizable payback in money. To be as nasty as possible, my parents had stretched every limit. My phone buzzed as I went over the letter. Mia was the one calling constantly. At last, looking for some answers, I took up Mia's voice carrying a mix of desperation and wrath, saying I had destroyed her life, and she had nothing left. She screamed at me. She said she had lost her work since Tom had informed colleagues and mutual acquaintances of hers about her adultery. The word had gone like wildfire, and she was today the target of rumors and criticism. She was deemed problematic, which resulted in her termination. Having my parents send me that legal fear, I felt Mia got what she deserved. She was inconsolable even though I tried to reason with her, stressing that she had to own her actions. Claiming that I had always wanted to see her fail, she charged me with being envious and bitter. The chat made me feel forlorn and exhausted. The rest of the evening, Jake and I went over our choices. Although we couldn't let my parents pressure us into compliance, we couldn't afford to get caught in a legal fight with them. This legal fight would simply mark the nail in the coffin, as I believe they knew we were already juggling our wedding budget. I contacted a lawyer for help the next day. The circumstances stunned him, but he reassured me our case was strong. He advised us to compile proof of Mia's adultery and how it affected her relationship to Tom. Should my parents carry out their threats, he also cautioned us to get ready for a counterclaim. All this was going on when I got another unplanned call, this one from Tom's mother. Having heard about the circumstances, she wanted to thank me for guiding Tom toward the truth. Tom was devastated, she remarked, but he was glad to learn before committing himself for lifetime. She also said Tom intended to start again in another city. Her call provided a minor solace among all the turmoil. It let me realize that by being honest, I had done the right thing even with the instantaneous fallout. Though they may act as outrageously as they wanted, my parents and Mia would remain in the wrong. That weekend, things took yet another drastic turn. Unexpectedly showing up at our residence were my folks furious. They insisted on talking with me. Though Jake tried to calm them, it soon turned into a shouting contest. While my mother wailed and begged me to mend things with Mia, my father claimed I had destroyed the family. Should I fail to meet their expectations, they reiterated their threats to cut me off financially and go on with the lawsuit. I stayed put, not cowering into compliance. I told them I would not be sorry for speaking the truth. Mia's actions have consequences. My parents stormed out at the end of the confrontation, resolved to start the case. The next several days were a haze of emotional upheaval and legal discussions. Though Jake and I tried to concentrate on our wedding preparations, the tension was too great. Extended family members, who had heard about the circumstances, started messaging us. Some offered support while others attacked my behavior. Although Jake didn't deserve all this drama, I really detested dragging him through it. But I was also appreciative of his unflinching support. In among all this, Meg, the childhood friend who had informed me of Mia's past infidelity, sent me an unexpected note. Should my parents want to take legal action, Her offer to submit a statement regarding what had happened at her party may be very important proof. Meg's encouragement and the data we were compiling helped me to begin to see hope. Although it was obvious that this struggle was far from finished, I resolved myself to stick to what was right. As I am working on it, I also want to thank you all for being my support network during this period. Though it hasn't been simple, you have clearly shown me direction. I will see you folks a little. Hello, everyone. After several more days, the issue has gotten quite hot. Mia and my dad insisted on getting together personally to go over everything. Jake and I consented, believing this encounter could at last provide some clarity and closure. We agreed to get together in our place, so we might manage the surroundings and steer clear of a public display. There was clear tension in the air as my parents and Mia showed up. When they sat down, I could see the expectation in their eyes. Though I had no intention of backing down, they most likely assumed I would be apologizing and begging for forgiveness. I began with tackling the elephant in the room. My parents and Mia looked perplexedly, obviously not expecting this. I informed them, I understand why everyone is here today, but before we go any further, I want to make one thing clear. I'm here to lay out the facts. I inhaled deeply and started making my point. I began with a couple months ago. I questioned Mia if it wasn't true that she handed me her phone during our double-date dinner, and that I found she was chatting to Mike, her ex-boyfriend, when she was in a very committed relationship with Tom. She said she made a one-time error, but we both knew it wasn't accurate. Mia moved uneasily in her seat, her face pallid. I carried on, opening a folder loaded with proof. She confirmed that Mia had been found cheating with her boyfriend. When I told her I had talked with Meg, who threw the party a year ago, this was a behavior trend, not a one-time error. I turned over a written statement Meg sent. Mia's parents and I looked at it, their expressions changing from uncertainty to shock. Still, that was only one thing. I also brought out more proof. Text exchanges between Mia and Meg, in which Mia admitted to cheating and pleaded with Meg not to tell Tom. These time-stamped signals were unambiguous and devoid of uncertainty. On the table, I arranged the printed messages, though this time it appeared more toward Mia than it did me. My mother gasped, and my father's face became red with rage. At last, I turned to Tom and said in a letter, he spoke about how he approached Mia following our talk, and how she finally admitted. He also detailed the emotional toll her adultery took on him and how it affected his choice not to pop the question. My parents found no words. Unable to dispute the overwhelming proof, they fixated on the paperwork before them. Tears welled in Mia's eyes, but she said nothing, clearly understanding the seriousness of the matter. I then addressed the lawsuit. Although my parents had threatened to sue me for emotional suffering and slander, based on the facts, it was abundantly evident that what I had said was accurate. They lacked legal justification for their posture. Actually, if they went after this, I had a strong case for a counterclaim. The space was quiet, clearly surprised, and adjusting to the reality of the circumstances were my parents and Mia. Knowing that I had at last advocated for myself, I felt relief. For the last time, I told Mia I did this because it was the proper thing to do, not out of spite or jealousy. Mia had consequences for her actions. It was time for her to own them. Regarding my wedding, my message was straightforward. Either with or without their approval, everything was going forward as scheduled. We wouldn't allow someone to destroy our happiness. Jake and I would be getting married. Rising to indicate that the session was over, I hoped this would be a turning point for all of us. That brought me closure, and I left the room. Though I am aware that difficulties lie ahead, I feel for the first time in a long time under charge of my own life. Although my parents and Mia can proceed with their case, now they know I will be squarely facing them, and there is no good outcome for either of us. The encouragement of our friends and relatives keeps Jake and I forging ahead with our new life, though the road to recovery with my sister and family will be long and challenging. We are ready to travel it together. Eventually, defending myself and acting morally offered a sense of tranquility I had been lacking for so long. Looking ahead, Jake and I know we are stronger since we confronted these obstacles squarely. Without the recommendations and encouragement in the comments, this would not have been feasible. All of you and your tales have taught me so much. Thank you, then, farewell. My wife confessed to cheating on me for 4 years because she was bored and left me for weeks. Now she wants me back. For 17 years, my wife, 39F, and I, 40M, had been wed. Our 3 girls are 11, 13, and 15. We have been together for around 23 years and were high school sweethearts. Although I don't know much, this is the only information I know. 3 days ago, my wife returned home from her job. On the 4th day, she had to go to work, but first, she quickly packed an overnight bag and departed. Our oldest daughter was home when she left, so that's the only reason I know this. My wife was sobbing and upset that she was hardly able to speak when she tried to talk to her. She was on the verge of panic. None of our calls or texts are getting a response from her. One immediately called her parents, who eventually replied that my wife is safe with them and urged me to be understanding and patient. They only said that. I attempted to get in touch with her brother, sister, and a close colleague. Her brother claimed to know nothing, and her coworker claimed that 3 days prior, she had arrived at work in the morning but had left by midday. She only knew that there hasn't been any communication with my wife or the children since. We're not hearing anything from anyone. I'm trying to get by without her here with my 3 daughters. All I can answer when the kids ask me what's going on or what happened with mom is that she's with grandma and grandpa and that we should be understanding and patient. I can't help but want to swiftly load up the kids and head over there without warning. Sitting here in limbo is terrible, and it's just 3 hours away. The children believe we got into a heated argument and are divorcing, but that couldn't be further from the reality. We never argue. The children are aware of this. I'm not sure what's happening, but could someone please explain it logically? I'm trying to handle everything without her, but my current mental condition has me thinking in circles. Your spouse would be the first person you would notify if someone died. My wife would be the first person I would turn to for assistance, if it were me. Though it's possible that some old trauma was triggered. We don't know anything. Nothing makes sense. I sit here in limbo with the girls, unsure of what to do. Nobody is telling us anything, and none of us know anything. It makes me anxious, afraid, irate, etc. Almost every feeling imaginable in this circumstance. Is there anyone who can think of something reasonable? Why would you do this to your family? Update 1. I apologize. I don't know much about Reddit yet. Not much to share. Because I'm not really sure how to do it, I don't know how to connect my previous post. I didn't sleep last night. It was a long night. I apologize for the brief update. I read every thread yesterday and into the night, but I don't plan on using the computer much today. Today, we finally read the responses. I'll just state my knowledge and stop there. I ended up calling the cops last night, as my father-in-law didn't call. A wellness check was conducted, as many of you recommended. I won't go into the storm of problems that resulted from this. But my wife has been having an affair for at least 2 years, if not more. Everyone was right. The other man reportedly died that night after suffering a heart attack on Tuesday. It seems likely that my sister-in-law and my mother-in-law have been aware of it and have been filling in for her. My wife still hasn't been in touch with either the girls or me. For the time being, I'm attempting to hide this from them, but to be honest, I don't know what to do next. I only know that. And it's enough to almost spell my demise. I appreciate all of your assistance and guidance. That's all, but I'm not sure how to get over this news. Please offer up prayers for me and the two of us. Update 2. A couple people have suggested this sub to me. I recently joined and have been reading a lot of postings whenever I have free time, usually at night when the day's turmoil is over. Naturally, the brain then takes over, and I have these depressive episodes. After that, I experience intense rage, and then both feelings at once. It's almost impossible to sleep. Then, like a zombie, I go about my day. All the acronyms are something I'm attempting to learn. I suppose Friday was my day. I initially believed my wife's affair to have lasted 2 years, but it now appears highly probable that it lasted longer. She had known the man she cheated on with a P for some time. The disclosure came after he sadly died of a heart attack. With the assistance of my eldest daughter, I continue to conduct research. I'm not yet ready to post about a lot of topics. I honestly didn't intend to keep posting about my predicament, but so many people have given me so much support and guidance that it's practically therapeutic. Knowing that so many other individuals are going through this kind of pain is painful. I'm so sorry for that. Yesterday and today, I had meetings with 2 different attorneys to go over my alternatives. I also made several calls about treatment. But where I reside, wait periods are really lengthy. I'm making an effort to follow many of the advice given by others, such as abstaining from drinking, although I don't and never have, taking care of myself, exercising, etc. For someone my age, I'd say I'm in excellent shape, but right now I struggle to find the motivation to work out. I recognize that a lot of you will want specifics, like who, what, when, and so on. But please know that I'm simply not yet ready to go into all of that. It feels like a new bomb goes off every day, and all I want is some guidance on one item, so that I might be able to get some sleep. My wife, the mother of my 3 lovely girls, and my best friend since high school, was everything to me. We shake hands in secret and share inside jokes. Everything is gone. Everything. It's simply gone. I get really depressed when I reflect back on all of our years together, including every milestone and every laugh. It is incapacitating. It seems like she didn't care about any of it, and now she won't be in my future. Naturally, the how could you question then surfaces, and I am seized with an insatiable rage. I pound the mattress and scream into my pillow till my arms hurt. The cycle is terrible. I only go to sleep because I'm so tired, and when I wake up, the mind games start over. My girls, who have been attempting to care for me as if they were my parents, receive all of my energy. They aren't treated fairly. After learning about the affair, how did you all sleep? With just your thoughts, how did you cope with the emptiness and silence at night? Aside from my daughters, I've determined that sleep must be my top priority in all of this. I'm hoping you can help though, because I simply can't. Many thanks to all of you. Update 3. I apologize for my relative inexperience on Reddit. A little more than a week has passed since my D-Day. However, I'm not sure how much of my circumstances I should reiterate or repeat. I've since discovered that my wife's affair lasted for more than 4 years. No precise time frame yet. It most likely began emotionally before becoming bodily. I'm also interested in how the epidemic and lockdowns affected this. I might or might not find out the answers. In any case, my in-laws, unexpectedly, came to visit their grandchildren yesterday. Since the start of this ordeal, Del Yu has been staying in their house, which is utterly ridiculous. Naturally, they greeted the girls for a total of 15 minutes. I have 3 girls with my wife. They then requested a private conversation with me. As you can anticipate, the chat was lengthy. I don't want to go into detail about it in this piece. In any case, my wife wants to return home, but is scared of the consequences of her behavior and is unable to confront her past. Her parents also conducted extensive research to find out if I intended to file for divorce. They put a lot of effort into persuading me to forgive my wife and keep the marriage together. They wanted my wife out of their home, but it was also obvious that they were extremely humiliated and ashamed. The conversation was quite polite and courteous. I acknowledged that I misled them by claiming that I was unsure of my future intentions, since I intend to get a divorce. However, I fear that if I tell my wife, I will never get the truth, and I might never understand. However, if at all feasible, I would like her to sit in front of me and explain everything. I want her to look me in the eyes and tell me everything after we've been married for 17 years, been together since high school, had 3 children, made innumerable memories, and experienced everything together. Additionally, I want my children to understand that I offered her the chance to apologize, explain herself, and resolve the situation as responsible adults. I'm constantly trying to decide which course will be best for my children. I'm not sure. Perhaps I'm not doing it correctly. I can't legally bar my wife from our house. The attorney was extremely explicit about that. Therefore, even if I really don't want this right now, I can't stop my wife from coming home. In fact, my girls and I have begun to establish a pleasant routine. I therefore made a demand that, in my opinion, would be impossible to fulfill for some time. If when my wife sat down with me face to face, looked me in the eyes, and told me everything about her affair, from beginning to end, without hesitation or more lying, I told her she may come home. She would next need to meet with the girls, provide an apology face to face, and respond to their inquiries. It's only fair, I reasoned, since they already know. Once more, she is legally free to return home anytime she pleases and is not subject to any obligations. However, I might be able to take advantage of her fear of us. Is that incorrect? Here, I'm not attempting to be cunning or dishonest. I simply don't want to live together just yet. If I can postpone it, our state has a 90-day waiting period before a divorce may occur. In any case, she will inevitably return home. Life will continue despite this disaster, and ultimately, we will both need to return to our jobs. I simply wish to extend it in order to plan and improve my emotional and mental well-being. My wife says she doesn't want a divorce, but she has been texting the females. She apologizes to them over and over again. The texts have been shown to me. She inquires about me every day, and the truth about what she has done to us is really getting to her, especially in the past few days. How can I handle this? Was my request stupid? My wife is probably going to return home sooner rather than later. Right now, I have faith in my future. This doesn't scare me because I know it will happen eventually. As we proceed, I simply want to choose what's best for my girls and subsequently for myself. I am grateful to everyone who has been providing support, guidance, and encouragement. Update 4. I apologize for the length, but I just need to get this out of the way. It will be a bit of an anticlimax. Despite the awful weekend, my wife returned home yesterday. As the week progressed, there was a fair lot of build-up to it. Normally, when she walked through the doorway, I would embrace and kiss her. But this time, there was just this incredibly awkward tension between us. Before she spoke, she really approached me and attempted to embrace me, but I turned her away. Unbelievable. As though nothing had occurred. Naturally, I begged her to tell me everything after she calmed down. She stated once more that she is not yet ready. The outcome was the same when we chatted on the phone earlier this week. She simply reiterated that she wasn't prepared for that, when I maintained that the only requirement for her to return home was that she loved the family enough to justify her absence of over 3 weeks. I took a few long breaths and tried to gather myself, even though it took a lot to keep from screaming at her. I didn't succeed. I abruptly stated after the first of many lengthy pauses that she had been having an affair with a coworker for more than 4 years. that she had planned to leave me for another man, that she had ghosted her entire family, and that she now enters the room without meeting the one requirement I had requested, and that I wanted a divorce. I suppose this is where the strangeness began. It was clear, from her facial expression and body language, that she was unaware of my level of knowledge regarding her affair. She gave me a wide-eyed look before simply standing in the kitchen and gazing at the floor. She remained silent and stern. This is not what I was anticipating at all. Perhaps an emotional outburst, a tearful confession, or even her cursing and screaming at me, accusing me of having the affair. Not this response, but rather a somber, "Okay, let's sit down and talk this out." To be honest, we must have stood in complete quiet for 5 minutes in the kitchen. It was simply the most peculiar thing I had ever encountered. Both she and I were obviously at a loss for words. I had read all of your remarks and suggestions regarding my predicament. I even made notes. I had prepared myself for every eventuality this conversation could bring, with the exception of this one. While I sat in front of a mirror, I ultimately made the decision to document what I knew about her affair at that precise moment. I may have been foolish, but I told her what I knew, albeit with some assumptions about how she met AP, her sister's participation, what transpired during COVID, etc. All she could do was look at the floor. She didn't say anything, so I became more and more irate, but I did everything in my power to avoid becoming profane or raising my voice. At last, I calmed down. Another long, uneasy pause followed. Sadness replaced anger when everything became clear. Then I gently questioned her about what I had done to make her leave. Was I ever loved by her? Was he, a P, worth it too? She remained silent, didn't move, remained motionless. Nothing at all from her. No sobs, no regrets, no shouting, no justification. She simply stood with her head down. Nothing. This was painful. Perhaps this was more painful than D-Day. Not sure whether I would have moved. I just stood there looking at her. Then, of course, things got worse. The whole interaction was being overheard by our girls. I'm just so damn foolish. Over the past few weeks, I've been putting a lot of effort into attending to their needs and putting them first. But after I confronted my wife, I became emotional and stopped caring about where they were. Our oldest daughter, who had a lot of pent-up rage, stormed downstairs and screamed. My wife hurried to the bedroom and locked the door. We are currently at that point. Before I went to sleep last night, I could hear my wife sobbing for the majority of the night. Only our youngest has attempted to communicate with her. The others have stayed away from her. I'm going to propose that she remain with her sister until we can complete the divorce, if I can muster the confidence to do so. However, she still calls this place home. If we all have to live with her, it will only be a sad situation. You were all right about my wife, and I was incorrect. I was mistaken about every year we spent together, every memory, and every moment that changed our lives. I thought she would fall to her knees and ask for forgiveness. I really believe that she would confess the truth and repent for everything that had happened over the previous 4 years, thus clearing her of any blame. We are not worth it to this woman, who once drove back to a farmer's market after realizing she had been handed $10 more in change than she was supposed to. She doesn't value me. Perhaps I never was. What comes next? It was really unpleasant at home today. The daughters and I made an effort to continue, as we had for the previous 2 weeks. But it is obviously not feasible. All I want to do is move on from this whole situation, from the divorce to the uncomfortable conversations to the anticipated battles, arguments, and drama. How did you handle having to live with your one chérie, especially if you have children? I am aware that this is only the start. I keep reading blogs that say things will get better, but I'm a long way from that. Right now, I can't stop wanting to yell at every opportunity. Naturally, I'm making every effort to keep the girls' minds calm, but I'm not sure whether I can sustain it for 3 months. Before all of this is finished, school will begin. This is my life now, I suppose. I appreciate everyone's strong interest in me. I'm not sure if the worst is over or not, but I would appreciate any help you can give me to get through this next stage. Update 5. Since my W returned home and I found out about her affair, I've been in a horrible mood. For my daughters, I've been doing my best to pretend. I make an effort to think and speak appropriately, but tonight, I must face the reality. It comes in waves, as many of you post every day, but tonight I was struck by a very large one and became somewhat agitated. My W has yet to get a lawyer, despite the divorce being filed. And once more, I'm attempting to be as gentle and patient as I can in this situation, because I'm beginning to see the possibility of an uncontested divorce that we primarily manage ourselves. But I'm not sure after tonight. We've been living together throughout the week. And because WW works so near to our family home, she spends Friday evenings at her sister's and Sunday nights at home. However, if there is no traffic, her sister is an hour away. It's been a habit of basically avoidance over the past few weeks, with W essentially keeping to herself and the girls, and I trying to go about our daily lives regularly. Even though we have informal conversations every evening, my oldest daughter and my W have stopped talking after a few heated arguments. Right now, it's for the best. I've been following a lot of your advice lately, in addition to what I've read. I put a lot of effort into maintaining my self-control around my wife. And even though it requires all of my strength and willpower, I've been brief and uninterested in our small conversations, although always being courteous and respectful. The past 2 Fridays, up until now, she has arrived home from work, gathered a few things, and left for her sister's for the weekend before I have even returned from work. Not tonight, though. When I got home, she was waiting for me in the kitchen. I attempted to ignore her tonight, but she gently took my hand and asked if I was going to treat her this way because she wasn't ready to discuss her affair with me. By the way, since everything went viral about a month ago, this is the first time she has ever spoken about her infidelity. I made an effort, I swear to you. I tried to just walk away and bite my tongue, but I became angry because our daughters weren't home at the time. I then released all of my vices, hurts, aches, anger, and miseries. I let her handle everything. I went on for so long, I can't even remember. I completely forgot what time was. I did become a little animated and loud at times, and I did raise my voice. I simply broke down and told her how devastated I am, how much pain I endure every day, and everything that has been haunting me and that I have been holding back. I mean, if I tried to summarize what I said, this piece would be 4,000 words long. I had no intention of stopping once I got rolling. Naturally, I broke down and became tearful once more. After this, I was furious with myself. Damn it, I've been doing great. She reached me. I allowed her to affect me. I was aware that it would occur. I was aware. Horrible. I can only express so much in the waiting room, and it has been building for a while. Additionally, W genuinely broke down and became emotional for the first time. She started crying furiously, which surprised me. Unfortunately, seeing that she was experiencing the same pain as I was, made me pleased. I wish I didn't care, but it felt good to watch her finally cry, since it showed that there was someone with some empathy inside of her. Surprisingly, she apologized several times as I was exploding. She would only mutter, "I'm so sorry," while sobbing in an awful way. Eventually, though, I left the kitchen before she could gather herself enough to say anything more. I begged her to stop bothering me. That's what occurred. She spent some time in the kitchen before heading back to her sister's house. After a half hour, the girls realized something had happened when they got home. Although it's difficult to conceal, I wasn't prepared to discuss anything and don't believe they should be aware of this. Do they? I don't want to stop the two youngest from making development because they have been doing a lot better. I also don't want to add fuel to my oldest's fury by telling her about this. I detest this so much. I detest it. I ought to have remained composed. Should have simply ignored my W and walked straight by her. Right now, I'm not sure. Looking back, it seems like she was merely attempting to bring up her affair but was unsure of how to do so. Obviously, she didn't go very far because I blew out. I am now genuinely concerned for her. I don't want her to suffer any harm, but I am aware that many of you will be critical of me for this. With almost everyone ignoring her, she has been alone with her thoughts and secluded. Although it's true that she deserves it, she is still a person and the mother of my children. What a blow to me. I'm really disappointed in myself. I apologize for the lengthy tirade. I also yelled at my brother over the phone. I'll try to start over on Monday. Man, I'm only a human. I must admit that it felt wonderful to vent to her, but now I'm feeling regret. Is it better to text my wife or to ignore her? I'm a complete wreck. However, I appreciate you listening, providing me with the help I need to get through this, and giving me all of your suggestions. We have all begun treatment, so that's something in the middle of the turmoil. But this is really, really difficult, just really difficult. Update 6. Thank you for your concern. I am aware that many of you have contacted me. The majority of you were right. Things aren't going well, and I haven't had any opportunity to access the internet. I was hoping to take a vacation from the internet, but I've been regressing a lot this week. It has simply been terrible. My wife has been really kind and has been apologizing for her affair, crying, smothering me, and knocking on my door at night to talk. She hasn't really left me alone this week. I've spoken to her when I felt like it, but I've also mostly ignored her. On Wednesday night, I finally lost my temper with her and told her to stop bothering me. Then it occurred last night. After her affair blew up, my soon-to-be ex-wife returned home a little more than a month ago. Now that we've started this awkward cohabitation routine, she came into my room after the daughters had gone to bed and begged to speak with me alone. In contrast to how she had been approaching me all week, I fed her first. But in order to avoid making the same mistake twice in front of the kids, we finally went to the garage and sat in my car. I apologize for the lengthy apology. She filled me in on everything. We spent about 3 hours out there, she said. I'm not sure how much to divulge. I couldn't sleep, so I stayed up all night listening to her cry again. I also shed tears. I would then become so enraged that I would have to force myself not to walk in and yell at her. Then sob, then rage, and so forth. I apologize if I don't reply to anyone for a day or so, but I need to get this off my chest before I try to sleep. Having my W apologize and ask for another chance all the time hasn't helped. I had to leave for a few hours tonight as well, in order to avoid her. Simply put, being around her hurt so much. In any case, her sister introduced her to her AP approximately 5 years prior to COVID, seemingly with no romantic ambitions. However, he was a higher up at the company she presently works for and wanted to work for. She was able to convince him that her affair was not the reason behind her wish to change careers. However, it goes without saying that she had more motivation after changing employment. The AP started flirting with her once she was hired. Texting at first, followed by images, and then more texting. Then, right before COVID struck, things got physical. She wanted to tell me right away after confessing to her sister, but she chose to keep it to herself. Naturally, my wife claimed that she went Nancy with her E shortly after, but he contacted her again as soon as the limitations and lockdowns were relaxed. And she continued to speak with him until the physical aspect of the affair resurfaced. She claimed to have halted the affair a few times out of remorse once businesses resumed operations, but she continued returning to him. Thus, it never ended. In essence, she provided a great deal of information. She recited the full 5-page packet of handwritten notes detailing her affair history, responding to questions as she went. She made false claims about weekend getaways with the girls, work-related travel, traffic bottlenecks, problems with her parents, shopping excursions, etc. The list was long, as I had expected. She told me so many falsehoods that I simply believed everything she said without question. They were merely a front to be with him, though. It only made me feel worse to hear it all. Everyone was right. Her love, however, never truly wavered. She never became aloof during all of this, unlike what I frequently read. Although intimacy did shift, it wasn't enough for me to raise concerns. In any case, she acknowledges that she fell in love with AP and desired a life with him. He promised her luxury items, trips, and everything he could do for her. He was older, divorced, and unmarried. She claimed that the excitement of being with him was too great to resist, and began to fantasize about fleeing her duties with the family. She remarked about how the everyday routines of family life bored her. She appeared to be honest, quite emotional, and extremely open. Halfway through, I started crying and lost my temper. As you can think, hearing it all hurt. Naturally, once she finished her confession, she told me how much she loved me and always would, and that she would stop at nothing to try to keep the marriage intact. Many of you anticipated this, yet it all seemed so phony to me, as if it had been practiced. Having spent more than half of my life with this woman, I can detect when she is acting shady. I think it doesn't matter if I'm mistaken, but I was more composed than I was the week before. Nevertheless, I became irate and said a few hurtful things, such as making fun of her AP for having several girlfriends, of whom she was only one that he was prepared to discard. She appeared pretty offended about that. When I think about this moment, when she would finally reveal all the one-liners I might say to her, or things I could say to hurt her back, a million thoughts cross my mind. I couldn't think of hundreds of answers during the emotional moment the other night, but I knew I would ask. If AP were still alive, and she had to choose between me and him, who would she pick? She hesitated and then whispered, "That's not fair." I pressed the subject, and then she eventually stated she'd, of course, select me. In reaction, I said that she was lying again, which was why I was divorcing her. The last thing she said was that she began to cry. We spent some time in the automobile. She continued to cry, but I was exhausted. So I simply informed her that we were divorcing and that we owed it to the kids to be there in their lives, to be good parents, and to get along amicably. In addition, I said that I hoped she was a decent enough person to end our divorce amicably and fairly after all the suffering she had caused me. That would demonstrate her true affection for me. Please realize that I'm not a petty person and that I didn't intentionally mean to hurt her when I told her that I had stolen anything from another website. It just seemed like the right way to wrap things up. However, I truly meant what I said and did. After telling her that I would have loved her forever and leaning over to kiss her on the forehead, I got out of the car and went to bed. That was it. Naturally, I didn't get much sleep the night before, and now I'm having trouble falling asleep tonight. I have no idea what will happen next. One positive, I suppose, is that she no longer has the chance to challenge the divorce. However, I have yet to speak with my attorney. I'm crying once more and reverting to my angry and depressed states. Hearing everything last night was really difficult, even though I could have avoided it all. She may have lied and made it up too, now that I know. Who knows? However, it appeared to go well with everything I had assembled during the previous month. For the time being, that's it. It seems like this never ends. I feel strong again after a few good days, and then something else happens. Even though it's only been days, it feels like months have passed. However, I will attempt to get some rest. Imagine that the one lady you have ever loved and kissed, the love of your life, informs you that she cheated on you for more than 4 years. Because she was bored. Had no relationship problems. No dead bedroom. No falling out of love. No growing apart. Nothing of the sort. Merely due to her boredom. I'm not sure if that makes it better or worse. Thank you for reading and for your assistance. It was a rough couple of nights. Horrible. My boyfriend's meltdown over my friend's age turns into a breakup after his sexist comments and refusal to own up. Original post. I've been dating my boyfriend Mike for about 4 months, and everything has been great up until now. This post is going to make Mike sound kind of crazy, but up till now, he's been the nicest, most laid-back guy I've ever dated. About a week ago, I was on a Zoom call with two of my friends, who we will call Annie and Sarah. Sarah is 27, Annie is 36. I was talking to Annie and Sarah, and Mike leaned over my shoulder to say hello. Because of the pandemic, he hasn't met either of them in person yet, and it was his first time actually meeting Annie at all. I wanted him to get to know my friends a bit, so I invited him to sit next to me and stick around. Sarah was talking about her dating woes and how the pandemic has made it harder to date than ever. Mike made this weird joke about how Sarah needs to find a guy quickly because at 30, she's going to hit the wall, and no man will want her anymore. He said it in this joking voice, but both Annie and Sarah looked weirded out. To be honest, Mike's never said anything like that before. I guess Mike picked up on the awkwardness, because he started trying to explain himself and started saying all this stuff about how women age like milk, and it's not the same for guys and men who tend to date younger, because after 30, they hold all the cards and can pick and choose. Annie said, I haven't had any trouble meeting men. And Mike said, just wait until you hit 30 and lose your looks. It's all downhill from there. Annie just kind of laughed. And I had to tell Mike that she's 36 and obviously hasn't lost her looks if he's mistaking her for a 20. I said it kind of jokingly, but Mike just went silent and then walked off into my bedroom and slammed the door. That night, and ever since then, he's been very moody and short with me, and keeps making passive-aggressive comments about how I'm always against him and never have his back. We've never even had an argument before this, so I don't know where that's coming from. I've tried to bring up the Annie thing several times, and he either clams up and refuses to talk about it, or turns it back to me. Annie and Sarah ganging up on him and bullying him, which I don't think any of us did. The rest of the time, he's just very short with me and keeps picking fights over tiny stupid things like my tone of voice being wrong. What do I do here? I really want to talk about what happened and about his views on women and men and aging, because that's kinda concerning. I don't understand why my sweet, cool boyfriend has suddenly transformed into this weirdo because he got politely corrected once. How should I solve this? TLDR boyfriend started talking about how my friend would be washed up when she hits 30. I told him she's 36, and he's been in a bad mood ever since. What should I do? Relevant comments. Kafale shot 123 WTF. Sounds like your self is a shallow pause. I mean, he was seriously looking for you to back him up that older women always fall apart. If that's what he really thinks, then your relationship is over in 2 years anyways. Smack upside the head, tell him to grow up, and y'all can move on from this. This the dumbest non-issue I've ever heard in my life. Your boyfriend is being a bitch, and he sounds like the type of person that is loaded up with double standards. Oh, that went through my mind too. And is part of why I want to talk to him about this, because if he really thinks women are washed up after 30, then what does that mean for our relationship? Spone Lowell. He sounds like a sexist dumbass, and that he's upset he got proven wrong? OP. What's weird is, he's never shown any hint of being sexist before this. If you'd asked me before all this, I would have told you he was a very modern and progressive guy. And it's not like we've never discussed things where he could have shown these kinds of views before. We discussed stuff like abortion and women's reproductive rights early on, and he was all about a woman's right to choose, for example. This just seems like it came from nowhere. Tasty units. How is this loser even attractive to you? I hope you talk to Annie and apologize for his behavior. If I were Annie, I would be incredibly disappointed in you. OP. I stayed on the Zoom call with Annie after he stormed off, so we already talked about it. And I basically said the truth, which is that he's never ever said anything like that before. And I wouldn't date him if he had. Annie seemed to find him saying all that stuff, then getting her age wrong, incredibly funny. Actually, but yeah, I did apologize for what Mike said to both her and Sarah. Deleted. Once I heard the phrase, when people show you who they really are, believe them. It changed my life. Listen to who he is showing you. He is OP. Edit. To give credit, it's a Maya Angelou quote. Thanks to everyone that told me. OP. I think I'm going to take your advice. It makes me sad because he really seemed so great up until now, but I guess this is a lesson to me that you can't always trust the first impression you get of someone. I texted him that I want to talk, so I guess either he can respond and we can have an actual adult breakup in person, or he can keep ignoring me and get dumped by text tomorrow. Update. First of all, I want to say thank you. I didn't expect my post to get such a big reaction, but seeing everyone basically unanimously tell me Mike was bad news was the wake-up call I needed. As a matter of fact, it was actually Sarah who told me to make the post. She didn't like Mike at all after that Zoom call, and I had been kind of pushing back when she suggested I end the relationship. She didn't sound surprised at all when I told her Reddit unanimously said he was bad news. I think she was probably thinking I told you so. I also called my dad after the Reddit post, and something he said basically cemented my decision to end it with Mike. He and my mom are the same age and have been happily married for 30 years. He said if you stay with this man, then on your 30th birthday, you're going to be worrying he'll never find you beautiful again instead of celebrating the milestone. Don't waste your time with someone like that. Every time your mom has her birthday, I feel happy that she's choosing to spend another year growing older with me. And basically, that's what I want. And obviously I wasn't going to have that with Mike. Anyway, long story short, I did break up with Mike. I texted him asking to meet up and talk. And when he asked what about, I told him we needed to discuss the Zoom call and how he'd been acting this week. I got more of the same stuff about how I'm a bully and ganging up on him, and he wants an apology from Emmy. And even though I had wanted to do the breakup in person, I realized he was going to keep trying to turn it around into being my fault. So I just told him over text that I didn't want to see him anymore. He sent back, whatever. Grow up. And hasn't contacted me since. So that's that. Not a very interesting update, I know. But even though a big explosive argument might have been a more interesting update, I'm kind of glad to have avoided it. TLDR. I broke up with Mike. Relevant comments. Thera 4545. Good thing done. Now for her to reconcile with her friend and tell her dad what great support they both are. Sarah's not mad at me, fortunately. We actually had a call just before I made this update, but I can tell she was holding back the urge to say she told me so. And to be fair, she did tell me so. Pookie582. I'm sorry it had to happen, but I am relieved this is the outcome. I hope you find someone a million times better. Also, I love your dad. He sounds like a great husband and a great father. Hope. My dad's amazing, and he and my mom are still so crazy about each other. They've always been marriage goals for me. My father crushes my dreams to protect the golden child and refuses to pay for my tuition. But I get my sweet revenge. I have a younger brother, 28, and we were raised by our dad, 56, ever since we were in middle school. My dad has always favored my brother over me, and with time, I got used to it. I was never the kind of son that my dad wanted, because unlike him, I had no interest in sports or doing the typical macho stuff that boys do. I was always more into more typically feminine things, which is why I was a huge mama's boy growing up. I loved everything to do with the kitchen, reading books, and even singing. My dad tried to make me play football with him, but I was no good at it. So gradually, we grew apart. My brother, on the other hand, was exactly the kind of son that my father wanted. He was a rough and tough boy, not afraid of getting dirty while playing or even getting hurt. He was the perfect son for my dad, and it was very obvious that he loved my brother way more than he loved me. He'd always have great things to say about my brother, but never me. My mother, however, never played favorites. She was fair to both of us, and that's why I loved her more as well. I did put in an effort to befriend my dad and spend time with him, but once we'd grown apart, he didn't seem too keen on fixing our relationship either. Unfortunately, the glue holding our messed up family together, my mother, passed away when I was in 8th grade. She'd been suffering from cancer, and by the time we realized it, it was too late for her to be saved. She was gone before we knew it. My mother's passing pretty much devastated me, and I kind of spiraled during that time. My only solace was the kitchen, and I'd whip up something new every day as if my life depended on it. My mother was a great cook, and she'd tell me often that had she not been forced into taking over her dad's business, she probably would have become a chef. So cooking was the only thing that brought me any comfort, since my dad and brother were no help in dealing with my feelings. They suppressed any emotional reaction they'd had to my mother's passing, and if anything, grew even more distant from me when, in normal families, something like this would have brought us closer. My fixation on cooking pissed my dad off even more, and he'd keep bugging me to get out of the damn kitchen and do something more manly. One day, when he'd had enough, he even told me that if he saw me in the kitchen again, he'd make me do all the other household chores as well. He told me to be more like my brother and man up, which ended in a huge fight where I told him he never loved me. And he agreed to it. It was finally out in the open, and I guess it was pretty much the last day that my father and I spoke to each other so openly, because after that, I stopped trying to win him over altogether, and he didn't seem to care about it either. For the next few years, I spent all the time I had in my room, listening to music and studying new recipes. I was determined to make this whole chef thing work out, not just for myself, but also for my mother. Meanwhile, my dad and I only spoke when it was absolutely necessary. My brother didn't care about me much either and ignored me, just like our dad did. So after my mom passed away, I basically had nobody I could count on. Finally, when it was time for me to apply to colleges, I decided to apply to a few of the top culinary schools, as well as normal colleges, so that I'd at least have a shot. I didn't know if my dad would agree to it, but I had to try. At the very least, I'd already interned at a restaurant secretly that summer and had some experience. I had even managed to make them write a recommendation letter for me, which helped greatly. I ended up getting accepted into several of the schools I had applied to, including one of the best, which just so happened to be in France. I was thrilled that this was finally happening for me, but I was equally nervous, since this would mean having to ask my dad for permission. I'd already made up my mind to beg him to let me go, if he seemed reluctant, because I just absolutely had to make this happen for myself. I wasn't prepared to give up on my dreams under any circumstances, so I did tell my father about it eventually, and while I was ready for him to reject my request, saying that it wasn't a masculine profession, I was absolutely not prepared for him to decline paying my tuition at all. I still remember being really confused when he told me that he wouldn't be paying for my education at all, since it wasn't as if my dad was poor in the slightest. As a matter of fact, he was pretty well off and could easily afford to send me to France. But money wasn't the reason he wasn't ready to pay for my tuition. It was the fact that if I went to France and joined such a reputable school, it would make my younger brother feel insecure. He was struggling with his grades and couldn't bring himself to focus. So my dad wanted me to either go to community college or find a way to pay for my own tuition. I was astonished that he would do something so cruel to his own son and didn't know what to say to him. I tried to tell him that I needed this, but he was hell-bent and absolutely unwilling to pay for my tuition. He even told me that my brother's well-being was his topmost priority and that he didn't want me competing with his son. I could hardly even believe that this was happening because I couldn't imagine any other father in the world crushing their child's dreams like this just for their favorite. After a lot of pleading and sobbing when he still refused to budge, I ended up getting into a huge fight with him where I said a lot of things to him and then left his house for good. I started living with my maternal aunt, my mother's older sister, instead. The only reason I hadn't moved out earlier was because I found comfort in the house where I'd grown up with my mom, and also because I didn't want to change schools, which I'd have to do if I moved in with my aunt, since she lived pretty far away from the high school I went to. I told her all about my dad and how he'd outright refused to pay my tuition, and that I needed her help. It felt like crap, asking her for a ton of money, since she wasn't as rich as my dad, but she reassured me that she'd take care of all my expenses. Somehow, she managed to get all her friends to pitch in and sent me to the culinary school of my dreams, and I'm always going to be grateful for that. Once I got there, I worked part-time as well, and tried to make the most of my time there, to make all the money that was being spent on me worth it. I worked really, really hard, and made my way up. When I graduated, I was one of the most skilled chefs there, and even got a job just a few months after I graduated. I started working at a really high-end French restaurant, and I sent half of my salary back to my aunt to repay whatever debt I had. Slowly but steadily, I was just lucky that I didn't have to rely on a student loan, or maybe I'd never be able to pay any of it off. Anyway, I worked in France for a few years before finally moving back home once I'd saved up enough to open up my own restaurant. It's been a couple of years, and in the meantime, I worked at another restaurant here as the head chef, while also working towards my goal of opening up my own restaurant someday. It was all finalized a few weeks ago, and I was able to finally open up the restaurant I'd been working towards for so long. Two of my friends, from back when I was in France, also joined in on my business idea and became co-owners with me, which is why I was grateful when they allowed me to choose what we were going to name the restaurant. They happened to be from the same state, so we were all okay with opening our restaurant in my city of choice as well. I chose to name it after my mother, which was a really lucky coincidence for us, since my mother actually has a really beautiful and uncommon name in the city we called our home. It was all finally falling into place. A few days back, we even had a little party for a few select guests before we were officially open for business. Of course, I invited my aunt and a few of her friends who'd also pitched in to help pay for my tuition. I also invited some of my friends back from school, but that was pretty much it. I didn't invite my father and brother because of obvious reasons. Even if I'd wanted to, I couldn't have since I hadn't spoken to them ever since I'd left home, and neither had they bothered to ever get back in touch with me. I guess all of us were better off this way, but I should have known that they would definitely show up to piggyback on my success someday. And that's exactly what happened. At the party we threw, they showed up an hour before the party was due to begin but weren't stopped by security since we shared the last name. They claimed that they were here to surprise me, and at least that bit was true. I was definitely surprised when I saw them. My dad and brother greeted me like nothing awful had ever happened in the past, and were really warm towards me, probably for the first time in my entire life. I was shocked to see them, so I just froze when they first entered the restaurant. My buddies noticed that something was off, and after politely greeting my family, they left us on our own. I'm thankful that they were able to pick up on my discomfort. I still hadn't recovered from the shock of seeing them again when they dropped another bomb on me and showed me a gift that they'd brought for me. It was a portrait of my mother, and my dad even told me that he commissioned it for me to hang up in my restaurant. As soon as he'd heard that a new fancy restaurant with this name was opening up in our city, he'd known that it was definitely none other than his son. He even told me that he'd always known that I had it in me. My brother too was jumping on the bandwagon and praising me, telling me that he was immensely proud of me. I couldn't believe my ears, and knew instantly that something was very strange about all of this. I didn't say much and kept waiting for them to get to the point, because I knew there must have been a reason for them to be here. I let them speak, and eventually, they did get to the reason they were here. Apparently, my brother was working as a bartender now, and even that was possible, just because my dad had managed to convince a friend of his to give him a job at his club. My brother's grades had kept falling throughout high school and college, and that's why he didn't end up in the high-paying positions my dad had always expected from him. On top of that, he'd also been slacking during his high school football games, which is why he wasn't able to get a sports scholarship either. Ironically, he's the one who ended up having to go to community college because he got rejected everywhere else. What they wanted me to do was make my brother a partner in the business, so that he'd have a more respectable position, even though he had done absolutely zilch to deserve it. I had the urge to laugh in their face, but somehow managed to hold back, and instead told them that I'd think about it. I wasn't going to think about it though. I just didn't want to turn them away. I wanted them to stay for the party, because I had a much better plan in mind. To humiliate my family, who'd come out of the woodwork as soon as they received word of my success. They seemed reasonably pleased, but boy, oh boy, they had no idea what was about to come. After a while, our guests started arriving, and in an hour or so, everyone we'd invited was there. I spent the evening socializing, while my dad and brother also did the same, and I even heard them boasting about me to a few people, while I marveled at their sheer audacity. Towards the end of the party, it was time for the hosts, namely me and my partners, to give a toast. My friends went first, since I wanted to save the best for last. Then, finally, it was my turn to speak. That day, I was finally going to speak my heart out. I started off by thanking all my guests, and raised a drink to my mother first, since she was the reason I'd even ever been able to achieve so much. I strongly believed that it was her faith in me, as a child, that had made me believe I could do any of this at all, and that had stayed with me even after she was gone. After I'd paid my due respects, I decided to get to the real respect as well. I brought up how I'd had to take a loan from my aunt and her friends to go to culinary school and thanked her as well. Then finally, I got to the reason I'd had to take a loan for my tuition in the first place, my family. I brought up how I'd grown up with a father who never loved me or had any faith in me, and always berated me for having feminine interests like cooking. I had a younger brother who was the replica of my dad. I told them all about how my dad had refused to pay for my tuition out of fear that I'd end up becoming more successful than my younger brother, who was his golden child. This is why I ended up leaving home. But despite all odds, I was able to rise and become who I am today. So in a way, they did deserve some credit for creating all the hardships I've had to face. Otherwise, I never would have found out how resilient I was. A lot of people shot my dad and brother the nastiest looks they could manage while I was saying all of this, and even they had the good sense to at least look ashamed, even though I knew that they didn't feel that way in the slightest. Anyway, I then walked over to my dad and brother and actually hugged them, putting up the same pretense that they had when they visited me today. "Two can play this game," I announced. "Because you'd shown up to celebrate my success today." I'd forgiven them for whatever had happened in the past, and I was even ready to give my brother the job of a bartender at my restaurant. To other people, this obviously seemed like a really emotional reconciliation, and they ended up actually clapping for me at the end of my speech. There were a few wolf whistles. Only my family and I knew that this was nothing more than an attempt to humiliate them, which I'd done quite successfully. But they had to smile and act like they were super grateful for what I'd done, since they couldn't exactly storm out angrily, which is exactly what they wanted to do. After a while, when the crowd had cleared out and it was finally time for us to go home, my dad and brother confronted me right outside my restaurant. They were furious, and I swear there were angry tears in my brother's eyes. They demanded an explanation for what I'd done. If I'd never intended on making my brother a partner, then I should have just turned them away as soon as they arrived. I just laughed and told them that this was my form of paying them back for everything they'd done for me over the years. This is exactly what you deserve. Then I walked away and didn't bother to look back, even when I heard my brother crying about how this was the cruelest thing, and even yelling after me to tell me that I'd regret this. But I didn't care since I was already in my car and was driving away. That happened a couple of days ago, and I haven't heard from them since. My aunt thinks that I might have gone a little too far with this one and should have just kicked them out at first. But I don't agree with her. This was well deserved. I'd had enough of humiliating my father and brother. Update 1. Hey, I decided not to reach out to my family to apologize in spite of what my aunt had said about me being way too harsh. I don't feel sorry about what I did, so I'm not going to pretend I do and go out of my way to say so. They could have taken the opportunity to apologize to me when they visited me, but they didn't. I explained this to my aunt as well, and while she still believes I shouldn't have done what I did, she hasn't said much about it. I guess this is just one of those areas where we agree to disagree, and I'm okay with that. In other news, my brother has made sure that he goes behind my back to talk crap about me to all our friends from school. It's unfortunate that we went to the same high school, since this just means that random strangers from school are now texting to confirm the rumors that I humiliated and then kicked out my dad and brother from my restaurant after feeding them 3-day-old food on purpose. Yeah, he exaggerated the story to make himself seem like the victim, which is pretty unsurprising. Ordinarily, I wouldn't care about petty rumors, but I don't want potential customers taking these rumors seriously. So I've texted my brother that if he doesn't stop spreading lies about me and my restaurant, then I'll make sure that he loses the job he has right now too. I'm hoping that it works, because I really don't feel like dealing with their unnecessary crap right now. I'm really busy with work, and this just isn't the time. Update 2. Lol. My brother texted back, saying that he was going to stop only when I'd make him a partner. I don't even understand what level of idiocy and delusion this is. Besides, if he wants to be a partner, then isn't it a pretty stupid idea for him to be talking crap about the same restaurant? I'm pretty sure this is my dad's tactic to ensure his darling son lands a high-profile job without doing any real work. But unfortunately, it's not going to work with me. I've told him that if he doesn't stop, then he'll be hearing from my lawyers, and that he's in absolutely no position to be negotiating with me right now. The only reason I haven't done anything yet is because I don't want to get caught up in unnecessary drama. But I'll definitely mess him up if he tries anything funny after this. And he should take this as my last warning. I really hope he does, for his own good. Update 3. So guys, it's been around a month since the last update. And since I've been really busy, I haven't been able to fill you in on what happened after that. My brother did stop talking crap about me behind my back, but they were still pretty desperate to join in on my success. So my dad decided to pay me a visit with my brother a few weeks ago, just to intimidate me. They showed up at my house, threatening to sue me for using my mother's name for my restaurant, and even told me that they'd already spoken to a lawyer. So, if I didn't want any trouble, I needed to make my brother a partner as soon as possible. Obviously, I called their bluff immediately, since no lawyer would take up such a stupid case. I think they were forgetting a very important fact. She was my mother too, and not just his wife. As far as I was concerned, no law could stop me from using her name. By then, I'd had enough of their bullcrap. So I told them that if they didn't leave me alone, they'd be forcing my hand, and I'd have no option but to call the cops. My brother lost his temper at that point and tried to grab me by the collar, but luckily, my dad held him back. I think it was the constant humiliation that had finally gotten to him, and he'd snapped. Well, it wasn't my fault, and they were lucky that I didn't call the cops right then. I told my dad that he needed to get the hell out, but he only told my brother to go cool off in the car and that he wanted to speak to me in private. After my brother left, he tried to manipulate me by telling me that if my mother knew what I was doing to them, then she'd be really upset with me, and I should bury the hatchet. At this point, I told him to leave me the hell alone, because even I was at my limit. He couldn't just use my mother to get his way. That was just low. To be honest, we were way past the point of reconciliation. Not once had either of them apologized to me, even once, so I really didn't understand why they expected me to forgive them without even asking for it. As for what my mother would feel, I'm sure she would have felt equally let down back when my father had refused to pay for my tuition. And for that matter, every freaking time he made me feel awful about myself. So, He should be the last person to give me a sermon about what my mother would and wouldn't like. I know she's proud of me wherever she is, and nothing that my dad says is going to change that. At least my restaurant is doing well, and hopefully we'll be able to expand soon enough. I found out my boyfriend and sister were secretly dating. I decided to get revenge and make them pay for how they treated me. Life has a tendency of delivering unexpected turns, don't you think? I never imagined that I'd be here sharing my heart with strangers online. Up until a month ago, I believed I had everything figured out. I'm a 48-year-old woman who lives in New York City. In addition to having a close-knit family and a loving boyfriend, I was the vice president of a prosperous advertising agency. Right now, nothing is certain to me now. It all began on what appeared to be a typical Tuesday. When I realized I had left my USB drive at home, I was in a hurry to attend to a crucial customer appointment. Not a huge thing, is it? I requested my sister Sarah, 44F, who was spending the week with us, to email me the files when I contacted her. I had no idea how much one small request would rock my world. My heart stopped when I opened Sarah's email. I was staring at private messages between her and my boyfriend, Tom, 45 megabytes, rather than my job files. I initially assumed it was some sort of twisted prank, but the terrible reality dawned on me as I read through the innumerable conversations. For the previous 6 months, my sister and my boyfriend had been having an affair. I had the feeling that I would get sick. I could hardly grasp my phone since my hands were shaking so much. In the hope that I was misinterpreting those messages, I must have read them a dozen times. However, everything was in black and white, including the inside jokes, the flirty banner, and the in-depth accounts of their covert meetings. How I handled that client encounter is beyond me. With my mind spinning from everything I had learned, I was operating automatically. I hurried home as soon as it was over, resolved to face Tom. He was sitting on the couch watching TV, as if nothing were wrong when I stormed into our flat. My blood boiled at the sight of him, so careless and uninformed. How long? I threw my phone at him and demanded it. After a little period of confusion, his face became pale as he came to terms with what I had witnessed. He stammered, I don't know what you're talking about, but I could see the remorse on his face. Don't lie to me, Tom, I spit out. I noticed the messages. Sarah and you. For what duration has this been occurring? He initially made an effort to deny it, but as I recounted passages from their conversations, he broke down. He finally said, 6 months, in a voice that was almost audible above a whisper. It simply occurred. We didn't intend for it to, he said. But I interrupted. I didn't want to listen to his justifications. 6 months, a half year of deceit and treachery. He was with my sister when I was working late, assuming he was watching TV at home. I became physically nauseated at the prospect. I said, get out, my voice trembling with hurt and rage. I don't ever want to see you again. Tom remained silent. I was left alone in the apartment we had shared for the previous 2 years after he took a few items and departed. I started crying as soon as he left. I wept till my eyes were dry. After that, I sat there feeling empty and numb. How could they harm me like this? Since I was a young child, Sarah has been my best friend and sister. Growing up, we had shared everything, dreams, clothes, and secrets. What about Tom? He seemed like the one to me. We discussed getting married and creating a future together. Everything felt like a lie now. I gave Sarah a call the following day. To comprehend why she would betray me in this way, I wanted to hear it directly from her. I could tell she already knew when her face showed up on my screen. She appeared as though she hadn't slept because of her swollen red eyes. She began, I'm so sorry, but I interrupted her. Why? With a chilly tone, I inquired. Why would you harm me in this way? As she attempted to explain, Sarah broke down and started crying. She sobbed. I didn't mean for it to happen. Tom and I simply clicked. I believe I'm in love with him, but I know that's no justification. Her remark struck me like a blow to the body. Are you in love with him? In love with my boyfriend, my own sister? In my stomach, it was like a knife twisting. Feeling more alone than ever, I hung up the phone without saying anything else. I contacted our parents, John, 55 million, and Mary, 53 feet, since I wanted to talk to someone in order to make sense of this mess. I believed that they would be sympathetic and supportive, and that they would be outraged on my behalf. Rather, their response made me feel even more deceived. My mom said, oh, honey, after I told them everything, Sarah probably didn't mean to cause you any harm. You are aware of her tendency toward impulsivity. What I was hearing was unbelievable. Didn't intend to cause me pain? She spent 6 months having sex with my boyfriend. Now, my father added, let's not rush things. The most essential thing is family. If you all get together and have a conversation, I'm confident you can resolve this. Figure this out. Were they sincere? How could I simply forgive and go on from something like this? They obviously cared more about maintaining order than they did about my feelings. On top of everything else, their response felt like yet another betrayal. As the days went by, I saw that I alternated between intense fury and debilitating melancholy. I was unable to eat or sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Tom and Sarah smiling together over their deception of me. My thoughts were consumed by the betrayal. I wasn't interested in playing happy families, but my parents kept calling to attempt to set up a family gathering to sort things out. How could I ever have faith in Tom or Sarah again? Knowing what my sister had done, how could I sit across from her at the dinner table? Something inside of me exploded during one of these phone conversations with my mother. When I cut her off, she was rambling on about forgiving others and moving on. No, I firmly answered. I won't act like everything is fine. They cannot be forgiven for what they did. But it's not healthy to hold on to anger, sweetie, she objected. You must I need my family to realize how much I'm hurting, I interrupt. But I'm done because it's obvious that won't happen. I've had enough of Sarah. I've had enough of Tom. And this is the end of our talk. With my heart pounding, I hung up. I had clarity for the first time since this whole nightmare started. I had had enough of being the victim. I had to take charge of my life once more. I scheduled a meeting with a lawyer and called in sick to work the following day. As I told my narrative, Jessica, 50 degrees Fahrenheit, listened calmly and then leaned forward, her eyes concentrated and alert. You have choices, and you have been wronged, she continued. Given your professional relationship with Tom, we can investigate this from a number of perspectives, including emotional distress, breach of trust, and potentially even workplace harassment. I sensed hope, something I hadn't felt in weeks, as Jessica outlined possible tactics. Hope for justice, not for forgiveness or reconciliation. I wish I could transform this suffering into something strong. How about Sarah? I inquired. Is there anything we can do to stop her involvement? Jessica gave a slow nod. Even though dealing with family members is more difficult, there are still options available to us. We can at least make sure that any assets that the family may have in common are safeguarded. That afternoon, as I walked out of Jessica's office, my head was buzzing with potential solutions. I had a sense of direction and purpose. For the first time since I found out about the affair, I was no longer only a victim. I was a lady with a purpose. I took a seat at my computer that evening and began planning. I started by making a list of all the things I wanted to do. I wanted to protect my financial future, reveal Tom's unethical behavior at work, make sure Sarah was held accountable for her activities, and demonstrate to my parents that I wouldn't be coerced or held responsible. I felt an increasing sensation of empowerment as I typed. One had indeed been harmed. I had indeed been deceived. However, I refused to let that define who I was. Rather, I was going to turn this suffering into motivation to start a new phase of my life. I was aware that the path ahead would not be simple. There would be more conflicts and challenging discussions. It's possible that my family won't comprehend or agree with my choices. But I felt strong for the first time in weeks. I was resolved. I made the decision to return to work tomorrow. I would take a proud stance and begin implementing my goals. Sarah and Tom believed they could treat me badly and yet get away with it. My parents believed they could use guilt to get me to ignore everything. They were all going to find out how mistaken they were. I noticed myself in the mirror as I shut down my laptop and prepared for bed. The devastated, deceived victim I had been for the previous 2 weeks was not the lady staring back at me. She was prepared to face any obstacles because she was a fighter. I said in a whisper to my reflection, "Watch out, world. I'm returning stronger than before." For the first time since this whole experience started, I felt completely at peace as I turned off the light and went to bed. I was eager to begin the first day of my new life, which was tomorrow. I'm going to talk to you now, Reddit. Have any of you had a similar situation? How did you respond to it? And how do you feel about my revenge plan? Is it excessive? Or is my desire to hold them all accountable for their actions justified? As I start my new path, I would value any guidance or assistance you might provide. Update 1. 2 weeks have passed since my last post, and I would like to express my gratitude to everyone for their guidance and encouragement. Your remarks have been a lifesaver for me at this trying time. I'll give you an update because a lot has happened. The revenge strategy comes first. After speaking with my attorney Jessica, I made the decision to act in several ways. First, we filed a formal complaint about Tom's inappropriate connection with me and his following romance with my sister with his human resources department. Considering that we are in the same industry, it was a risky move, but I couldn't allow him to get away with it. The reaction was prompt. While an inquiry was conducted, Tom was put on administrative leave. I'll admit that I felt a little satisfied as I watched him being led from the premises with a box of personal belongings. However, it didn't last long. I was struck hard by the fact that my private life was now being used as fodder for office rumors. My personal role at work has grown more complex. Even though my supervisors have been encouraging, I can sense the sidelong stares and whispered discussions that end when I walk into a room. It's obvious that people are curious about my level of knowledge, my anticipated length of stay, and my stability in managing large accounts. In an effort to demonstrate that my personal drama won't impact my professional performance, I've poured myself into my work. Things have gotten worse on the family front. Do you recall how my parents pushed for a family gathering to work things out? It was a catastrophe, but it did happen. A quiet room at a downtown restaurant served as our neutral meeting spot. My blood pressure shot up the moment I went in and saw Sarah sitting there, looking anxious yet somehow defiant. Naturally, my parents were also present, serving as mediators. My father started by saying, "Girls, we're here to talk this out like adults. Until our family decides how to proceed, nobody is going anywhere." I couldn't contain my laughter. "Go ahead, are you serious? There is no way to move past this." Sarah's voice trembled as she spoke. "I am aware that what I did was improper. I sincerely apologize. However, shouldn't we at least attempt to resolve this?" With a mixture of anger and incredulity, I turned to face her. "Resolve this? You spent 6 months having sex with my partner. Day after day, you deceived me. What do you want to do now? Pretend it never occurred, and give it a hug." "She's not saying that," my mother interrupted. "As a family, we simply want to figure out how to get better. You two have always had a tight relationship." I corrected her, saying we're close. Tense in the past. And who is to blame for that? From there, the discussion took a different turn. My parents begged. Sarah wept, and I felt numb. It was obvious that they all expected me to put family unity ahead of my personal sentiments, and to finally forgive and move on. I had had enough guilt tripping and pointless discussions after an hour. With a loud scrape of my chair against the floor, I got up. "This is useless," I remarked. "It appears that you have all determined how this should proceed, without taking my feelings into account. Well, I'm not complying. I'm finished." I heard my mother calling after me as I left, but I chose not to turn around. I disabled their social media accounts and phone numbers that evening. Although it was a bold step, I needed time to recover from their unrelenting pressure. Things took an intriguing turn on the Tom front. He contacted me a few days after he was placed on leave, asking me to withdraw my complaint to HR rather than offering an apology or pleading for my forgiveness. He begged over the phone that this may destroy his career. "Can't we deal with this in private?" His boldness astounded me. "Take this in private?" "Similar to how you and Sarah had your 6-month clandestine affair." He was bold enough to sound angry. "That isn't the same. We're talking about my livelihood here," I retorted icily. "You ought to have considered that before you chose to sleep with my sister." "Tom, actions have repercussions. You need to face yours. Now." I experienced a range of feelings once I hung up. Hearing the desperation in his voice and knowing that he was finally being held accountable for his acts made me feel a certain amount of satisfaction. However, I was also worn out from the drama and the continual reminders of their treachery. At that point, I decided I required a change, a new beginning. I started researching employment prospects in other cities. The idea of uprooting my life was both thrilling and horrifying, but the more I considered it, the more it seemed right. With a Seattle boutique agency, I discovered a good lead. Following a round of interviews, they offered me an offer after being impressed by my experience and portfolio. Although it was a lateral transfer in terms of employment, the opportunity to reinvent myself and the change of environment were invaluable. My supervisor was sympathetic, but obviously unhappy. When I gave notice at work, he questioned, "Are you certain about this? Here, you've established a solid career. Don't allow personal problems to pull you away." I was grateful for his care, but I had already made up my mind. "I'm positive," I assured him. "I need to start over on both a personal and professional level." I was shocked by how many coworkers contacted me to offer their support when word circulated about my upcoming leave. Many of them talked about how they overcame personal obstacles and changed their identities in the middle of their careers. Their words of support made me more determined. I've been going to a therapist to help me process everything in the middle of this. I have benefited greatly from Dr. Larson's 58 degrees Fahrenheit assistance in processing my anguish and anger. She has assisted me in seeing that, although my emotions are true, I must not allow them to control me. During one session, she informed me that, while seeking revenge may feel good at the time, it won't make your grief go away. Living a good life and going on is the best form of retaliation. I'm making an effort to heed her advice and concentrate on creating my new life rather than destroying my previous one. It's not always simple, and sometimes I still feel like my wrath will get the better of me. But I'm getting better. As I get ready to relocate to Seattle and pack up my apartment, I'm thinking about how much has changed in only a few short weeks. My sister, my partner, and, in a sense, my parents have all passed away. However, I've also developed a new feeling of self, a resolve I was unaware I had. I am aware that the path ahead will not be simple. It's intimidating to start anew in a new city and start my life over from scratch. But I'm looking forward to the future for the first time in a long time. I'm interested to see who I'll develop into once I'm not burdened by expectations from my family or betrayal. I hear those who told me to forgive, move on, and take the high road. I no longer seek retribution for its own sake. Yes, I'm working for justice. But more than that, I'm working for my own happiness and mental health. So, Reddit, that's the current situation. I'm going to start a new chapter in my life, putting the hurt and treachery behind me. Although I'm anxious, thrilled, and a bit afraid, I'm primarily proud of myself for taking charge of my life. I appreciate all of your help and guidance. You have no idea how much it has meant. After I'm settled in Seattle, I'll provide another update. Good luck to me. Update 2. 3 months have passed since my last post, and I'm writing this from my new Seattle apartment with a view of Puget Sound. Every day, the view reminds me of my progress. It's exciting and scary to move to a new city in your late 40s. Although everything is new, There is a certain liberation that comes with not knowing. Nobody here is aware of my past, my suffering, or my guilt. Whoever I want to be, I can be. In the best way conceivable, my new position at the boutique agency has been demanding. I'm taking on multiple roles because the team is smaller. I've had to learn new talents and step outside of my comfort zone as a result. I am gradually forming new friendships. It's a start, even though it's not as good as the close relationships I had in New York. Let's move on to the fallout from my revenge plan. I placed that in quotes because, in retrospect, it was more about justice and taking back control of my life than it was about getting even. In the end, Tom lost his job due to professional misconduct. A history of inappropriate behavior with other coworkers was also discovered during the HR probe. My old employer called me and thanked me for coming forward and apologized for not detecting Tom's actions sooner. The repercussions for Sarah have been less professional and more personal. As word of her affair spread, she lost acquaintances, and our parents finally seemed to understand the seriousness of what she had done. She wrote me a tearful letter last week, filled with explanations and apologies. She talked about how she had always felt like she was living in my shadow and of her own fears. The letter concluded with an appeal for pardon. For the first time, I sensed a tiny fracture in the wall of wrath I had constructed. But I'm still not there, not even close. I haven't replied yet, and I may not do so. Additionally, my parents have begun contacting me more often. Instead of advocating for reconciliation, they have been helping me adjust to my new life. In order to send a housewarming present, my mom even inquired for my address. My own self-change has been the most notable. Peace has slowly taken the place of the rage that previously overwhelmed me. Even though I still get angry occasionally, they are become less frequent and less severe. This approach has been greatly aided by my therapist, Dr. Larson. Forgiveness is something we've been working on, not for Tom or Sarah, but for me. She has aided me in seeing that forgiving someone does not include accepting their actions or allowing them to return to my life. It entails letting go of the grip that rage has on me. I've been concentrating on personal development and self-care. I've started taking photography classes, joined a reading group, and started doing yoga and meditation. I went on my first date since the whole situation last weekend. It wasn't a life-altering experience, but it was nice to meet someone new. His name is Mark, 52 million. In terms of my career, I'm succeeding in unexpected ways. My enthusiasm for advertising has been rekindled by the new beginning. I presented a campaign that challenged convention last week. We got the account because the client thought it was fantastic. It served as a potent reminder of my value on both a personal and professional level. There have also been difficulties. There are days when loneliness is too much to bear. I long for the comforts of my former existence. Sometimes I wonder why I choose to move away from everything. But then I think back to where I was only a few months ago. Angry, damaged, and caught in a vicious cycle of betrayal and suffering. I know I made the right decision when I consider how far I've come. I want those of you experiencing similar difficulties to know that there is hope. You'll make it through this. You'll discover a strength you never knew you had. And you'll emerge from the experience stronger and wiser, if not unscathed. I have a long way to go. I'm still recovering, learning, and developing. But I'm looking forward to the future for the first time in a long time. What occurred to me no longer defines me. Instead, what I decide to do next does. Reddit, I appreciate you joining me on this adventure. Some of my darkest moments have been illuminated by your encouragement. Although I have no idea what the future will bring, I am certain that I am prepared to meet it head on. When there are noteworthy developments, I'll provide another update. I'll stay here in Seattle until then, appreciating fresh starts and second chances as I watch the sunset over the sound. Update 3. The adage, revenge is a dish best served cold, has never felt more fitting as it does now. 6 months after my last update, I've been quite busy, and now my well-planned outcomes are finally materializing. Let's start by discussing Tom. Do you recall his dismissal from our previous employer? But that was only the start. I've been methodically damaging his industry-wide professional reputation. How? Thanks to former coworkers who owed me favors, I was able to produce an anonymous blog post that detailed his misbehavior and included censored evidence from our HR department. In the world of advertising, the blog gained a lot of popularity, but I continued. Posing as a headhunter, I created a phony LinkedIn profile and contacted Tom, promising him interviews at prominent agencies. Naturally, my pals who are actors staged these interviews. Tom would arrive, wait for hours, and then be informed that the interview was not planned. This occurred 5 times before he realized what was going on. Last week was the coup de grace. Using some cunning, I managed to get Tom invited to participate in a large advertising conference. This, he believed, was his opportunity to turn his life around. He was unaware that I had positioned multiple persons in the crowd. They questioned him sharply about his prior misbehavior when it came time for Q&O. After stumbling and perspiring, Tom bounded off the stage. Since the video became public, there's no longer any prospect that he will be able to recover his career. Let's go on to Sarah. With that heartfelt letter, my darling sister believed she might slither her way back into my favor. I chose to let my deeds speak louder than my words, rather than answer. I employed an excellent PI to investigate her past, and they found a wealth of information. As it happens, Sarah has a history of taking out loans from our parents and never repaying them. I submitted our parents a thorough report that included dates and amounts for each of these loans. They were, to put it mildly, shocked. However, it wasn't all. Additionally, the PI found proof that Sarah had embezzled money from her job. That little issue was resolved when her company's audit department received an anonymous tip. When I discovered that Sarah had been lying about her educational background, however, it was the cherry on top. Although she stated on her resume that she had completed her degree, she never did. After making a brief phone call to her human resources department, Sarah was declared unemployed and unemployable. Our parents, on the other hand, at last realized the truth. To supposedly clear the air, I called a family gathering. Rather, I showed a PowerPoint that listed all of Sarah's deceptions and manipulations across the years. It was immensely satisfying to see the changes in their expressions, from bewilderment to shock to rage. Sarah is now totally cut off from them, both financially and emotionally. This degree of retaliation may seem extreme to you, but I can promise you that it is just. I almost got destroyed by these people. They attempted to gaslight me into forgiveness, abused my confidence, and diminished my sense of value. Forgiveness is not an option. Despite everything, I've been doing well in Seattle. My new position? I currently lead a boutique agency as its CEO. As it turns out, the owner wanted to retire, and I made him an irresistible offer. It was worthwhile, even if I had to spend a sizable portion of my savings. Now, I have the authority to ban Tom and Sarah from a whole industry. My personal life has also changed in an intriguing way. Do you recall the architect Mark? He has his own spiteful streak, it turns out. He offered some inventive ways to make his ex-wife's life miserable when she cheated on him. We are now allies in life and retaliation. Being with someone who sympathizes with my suffering and encourages me to take action is thrilling. In addition, I have established a support group for those who have experienced familial betrayal. I've gained some wonderful allies, and it's been helpful. We encourage one another, exchange tactics, and sometimes even assist one another in plotting retaliation. I adore it. It's like a book club with a twist. Some of you may be wondering if any of this makes me feel bad. The answer is definitely no. I provided Tom and Sarah the opportunity to express genuine regret and make amends. Rather, they attempted to control me and force me to forgive before I was ready. They are now realizing that their acts have repercussions. I want to respond to those of you who suggested that I be the greater person or take the high road. Sometimes it's overrated. Fire must sometimes be put out with fire. I'm not saying that everyone should follow this route, but for me, it was essential. This retaliation has been empowering, therapeutic, and well worth the effort. I feel a sense of calm that I haven't experienced in years as I sit in my corner office with a view of the Seattle skyline. The rage that used to devour me has given way to contentment. It feels amazing to be in charge of my story now. Remind yourself that you don't have to be a victim if you find yourself in a similar circumstance. You don't know how powerful you are. Don't be scared to use it, but use it carefully. My last update will be this one. I'm ending this chapter of my life by making sure that the people who harmed me never forget what they did, not by forgiving and moving on. I appreciate everyone who has followed my journey. Cheers to fresh starts, delicious retaliation, and the strength that comes from taking charge of your own destiny. Be careful, world. Not only am I back, but I'm returning with a bang. My parents kicked me out because of my sister. 6 years later, they're asking for help to support her and her 4 young children. I, 32, am currently in charge of significant commercial development projects around New England as a successful architect at a prominent Boston firm. Nathan, a 34-year-old man who works as a project manager in sustainable development, is my fiancé. Our wedding is scheduled for the following year. On the surface, my life appears to be ideal. I have rewarding work, a wonderful relationship, and a lovely craftsman-style home that I designed extensive modifications for. However, I'm questioning everything because of a complex family situation that recently reached a breaking point. I must go into great depth about my family history in order for you to comprehend the current circumstance. I was raised in a Connecticut suburb in an upper-middle-class household. My mother, Phoebe, 56F, taught high school at a private school until she left 6 years ago. And my father, Richard, 58M, works as a corporate lawyer at a reputable business. Ashley, my younger sister, who is 30 degrees Fahrenheit, has always been the star of our family. Favoritism was evident from my earliest recollections, even if my parents would strongly dispute it if questioned. I received consecutive, as on my report card when I was 8 and Ashley was 6, and I was simply informed. That's expected of you? While Ashley received B's and was commended and brought out for ice cream because she was trying her best. Throughout our childhood, this trend persisted. Ashley's meager efforts were widely praised, while my accomplishments were anticipated and frequently disregarded. When I was 15, I recall one specific occurrence. I had been working on my design project for months, frequently staying up until 2 in the morning, in preparation for a national high school architectural competition. I received a minor scholarship as a result of placing second nationally. Ashley had an ordinary soccer match that day, so my parents didn't even make it to the award ceremony. That's nice, they replied, barely taking their eyes off the TV, as I brought my award home. Before turning back to Ashley's dramatic account of how she nearly scored a goal, even though my parents were clearly biased, I did well in school and in my personal life. I led multiple community service projects, kept a 4.0 GPA, and served as president of the student body. In the meantime, as Ashley approached adolescence, her actions became more alarming. When she began to slip out when I was 14, my parents told me to keep a better eye on her. She was caught stealing high-end makeup when she was 15, and they accused me of not providing her my allowance money, even though she clearly needed it. The assumption that I should put Ashley's needs and interests ahead of my own was the most annoying aspect, not only the partiality. My part-time job at a local design firm, where I made coffee and filed papers, allowed me to save up $3. Oh, when I was 16. I intended to use it for a Columbia University summer architecture course. My parents, however, borrowed my cash to assist cover the repairs after Ashley, who wasn't supposed to be driving, smashed her boyfriend's car. They never fulfilled their commitment to reimburse me. I lost the chance to improve my college applications and the summer program opportunity. I was able to gain admission to a prominent architectural program in spite of these obstacles. In order to save money, my parents agreed to let me live at home while I was in college and to assist with my tuition. They wanted me around to assist handle Ashley, who was now in high school and becoming more disobedient by the day. So this wasn't totally selfless. I recall making several attempts to speak with Ashley about her actions. One exchange is particularly memorable. 3 months or so passed before everything collapsed. At 3 in the morning on a school night, I discovered her slinking back into the house. Assisting Ashley to climb through the window, I whispered, "Ashley, you need to be more careful. You're in your senior year, and colleges look at more than just grades." She retorted, "Stop trying to be mom. Just because your life is boring and all about buildings doesn't mean mine has to be." In hindsight, I ought to have anticipated this. Ashley spent a lot of time with Tyler, her 17-year-old ex-boyfriend, who was known for being trouble. My parents viewed everyone I dated with extreme mistrust, yet they were surprisingly lenient about their relationship. My mother accused me of being envious of Ashley's vibrant social life when I attempted to voice my concerns about Tyler. 6 years ago, everything drastically altered. One day, Ashley, a senior in high school at the time, came home and declared she was expecting a child. The father was Tyler. I can still clearly recall that night. Ashley sitting on the couch with a look of fear and defiance on her face, my father pacing the living room, and my mother sobbing uncontrollably. In the confusion that ensued, my parents somehow twisted the facts to accuse me of failing to keep a closer eye on her. My mother arrived in my room the following day with news that would forever alter my course in life. Without even looking at him, she stated, "You have to move out by the end of the week." I couldn't understand. What? Why? With Tyler moving in and a baby on the way, the house isn't large enough for all of us. Ashley needs your space. One approach to support your sister at this trying period would be to move out. I made an effort to reason with her. During my third year of college, I worked part-time at a nearby architecture business and maintained a 3.9 GPA. She insisted on finding me a cheap apartment close to university, even though I just requested for a few months. The worst thing was, when my father summoned me to his home office the next day, he delivered another hit while seated behind his enormous oak desk, which he had always used to frighten clients. "We won't be able to continue paying your tuition," he stated in a cold, clinical tone. "That money is necessary for Ashley and the child. You'll figure something out since you're intelligent." I stood there, looking at the man who had always emphasized the value of education and accountability, suddenly severing his daughter's ties after she had done everything correctly. The irony hurt. I packed my things that evening. My father stopped me in the driveway as I was packing the final box into my car. I briefly believed that he might reconsider. Rather, he gave me a piece of paper with a list of local women's shelters on it. He said, "Just in case," and went back inside. The next phase of my life was the darkest. For 4 months, I lived in my car and, for safety, parked every night in a different Walmart lot. In the architecture firm where I worked part-time, I would change in public toilets, take a shower in the campus gym, and keep my business attire in my locker. I took a second job working as a late-night barista, frequently juggling multiple jobs while attending classes. I asked a few family members for assistance, but they all turned me down. My 53-year-old Aunt Susan, who had always expressed her pride in my accomplishments, informed me that she didn't want to become embroiled in family strife. According to my grandparents, they were too old to handle the matter. I occasionally went days without eating a decent meal, barely making it on protein bars and coffee. I frequently slept off at my desk while working on my homework in the college library, which was open 24 hours a day. I kept my GPA the same in spite of everything. My escape was architecture. I put all of my suffering and willpower into my designs. My parents never once called to see whether I was still alive during this time. Ashley didn't either. After learning that she had given birth to a boy, I made one phone call, but it was awkward and short. After that, there was no communication for 6 years. I had to start over in my life throughout those 6 years. Despite working 60-hour weeks and living in my car, and then a small room in a dubious area of town, I finished with honors. A famous Boston business was interested in my final thesis project, which was a design for a sustainable community center with transitional housing that received multiple prizes. Living in a small studio apartment and trying to save as much money as I could, I began my career as an entry-level architect. Every advancement was a triumph over my past. I was managing my own projects for 4 years. My area of expertise was sustainable commercial development, and I gained recognition for my creative ideas that put the needs of people and the environment first. 3 years ago, Nathan and I met at a seminar on sustainable development. During the Q and a portion of his presentation on green construction projects, I disputed one of his claims. He invited me to continue the conversation over coffee rather than becoming defensive. Dinner evolved from that coffee into the most wholesome and encouraging relationship I've ever experienced. Nathan is well aware of my background. He was present when I purchased my first home after getting expelled, when I signed the paperwork and broke down, because I was so overcome by the fact that I finally had a place where no one could make me leave. He held me. He supported my idea to refurbish it and make it an environment that reflected all of my accomplishments over the years. Through mutual contacts, I occasionally learned tidbits about Ashley's life. Shortly after the birth of their baby, she wed Tyler, but the two of them split up after 6 months. By that time, she was expecting her second kid, but the father had entirely vanished after learning of the pregnancy. She had another kid with Marcus, the man she married 2 years later, but their marriage failed when she had an affair. She is now pregnant once more and doesn't seem to know who the father is. I got a call yesterday from an unidentified number right before bed. After 6 years of stillness, my mother called. She initially pretended nothing had happened, inquiring about my life and showing interest in my accomplishments. I briefly felt like that young child again, excited to tell my mother about my achievements. I even began to tell her about my recent promotion to senior architect and my engagement. Then she revealed the true reason she had called. In order to assist Ashley and her kids, my parents want me to return to Connecticut. They say they're too old to care for 4 small children, and my father will shortly be retiring. They even had the gall to claim that, as the successful sister, it is my duty to support the family. My mother said, "You've always been the responsible one," with that cunning tone I so vividly remembered in her voice. Now more than ever, Ashley needs her big sister. Family must remain united. A chilly chuckle erupted within me. Family have to stick together? I said it again. When I was sleeping in my car, where was this family? When I was barely eating and working 2 jobs? When there was nobody for me to turn to? I went on despite my mother's attempt to stop me. You absolutely abandoned me, kicked me out, and stopped paying for my schooling in order to help Ashley. You expect me to sacrifice my life, career, and relationship in order to clean up your mess once more now that she has continued to make bad decisions and you're sick of dealing with the fallout? I hung up after telling her that I would never again risk my life for Ashley. Since then, family members who turned down my request for assistance 6 years ago have been bombarding my phone with messages accusing me of being callous and asserting that family helps family. Nathan completely agrees with my decision to uphold my boundaries. But other people argue that since they are still family and retaliation won't mend old hurts, I should at least have a meeting with them? But this doesn't seem like vindictiveness to me. I saw it as defending the life I created on my own, after being deserted by those who were meant to keep me safe. Update 1. First of all, I want to thank everyone for their tremendous support and wisdom. My phone has been buzzing non-stop with messages from extended family members for the past 48 hours, which has been very taxing. The circumstances have changed in unexpected ways. My mother wrote me a long email detailing Ashley's children's daily problems, along with comprehensive pictures of my nieces and nephews. The oldest, who is currently in kindergarten, is exhibiting early behavioral problems. The second child's health issues necessitate regular medical care. Another is on the way, while the third is still a toddler. A communication from an old family friend who teaches at Ashley's old high school was what really got to me. She informed me that in order to pay for Ashley's costs and medical bills, my parents have been taking out loans. My father has delayed his retirement indefinitely, and they have already remortgaged their home. Ashley personally sent a direct message, which was the most unexpected development. She reached out for the first time in 6 years, not to apologize, but to let her big sister know that she had changed and needed her. She talked about acknowledging her past sins and his attending therapy. Although I've seen this pattern before, I still have a part of me that wants to believe her. In order to keep both physical and emotional distance from the family, my fiancé Nathan proposed a compromise, providing financial support for the kids' schooling through a trust fund. It's an intriguing idea that would enable me to assist the defenseless kids without being embroiled in the family strife. All of this is still registering in my mind. Seeing those pictures of the children who are innocent in all of this has made me feel conflicted, even though my logical side knows one, owe them nothing. When I make a choice about Nathan's suggestion, I'll provide another update. I need some time right now to process everything without having to deal with family pressure all the time. Update 2. Over the last 24 hours, everything has drastically changed. My mother called me in an emergency last night. Ashley had been involved in a severe vehicle accident. Another automobile ran a red light and collided with her car while she was driving alone. The situation was dire because she was pregnant. I got into my car and drove to Connecticut for 4 hours without giving it any thought. It felt unreal to enter that hospital. As he paced the corridor in his faded suit, my father appeared to be much older than his years. When she saw me, my mother lost it all. I hadn't actually seen them in person for 6 years. Although Ashley's injuries were not life-threatening because of the airbags, the doctors added they had to perform an emergency C-section in order to save the baby. With a questionable prognosis, the premature baby is currently in the NICU. My biggest surprise was going back to the house I grew up in. I grudgingly complied with my parents' request that I remain rather than book a hotel. Entering my former room felt like entering a time portal. My old desk was still in its original condition. My architecture designs were still attached to the walls, and even my high school trophies were still neatly arranged. Everything was just as I had left it 6 years prior. Then it dawned on me that they hadn't actually converted my room into an area for Ashley. The whole needing the room pretext had been nothing more than a pretext. Another unanticipated emotional moment was meeting my nieces and nephews. I was astonished to hear Charlie, 6 million, the oldest, say, "Aunt Rebecca, I know you from the pictures." My parents had apparently informed them about their aunt, who constructs stunning structures, in spite of everything. After I assisted them in building a block tower, the smaller ones, Ava 4F and Lucas 2M, who had been timid at first, quickly warmed up. After 3 days here, I'm learning new things that make my emotions even more complicated. I discovered a stack of unsent letters from my father while searching through some old documents for Ashley's insurance information. They were letters of apologies that he never mailed, all addressed to me and dated throughout the previous 6 years. Tears appeared to have soiled several of them. Yesterday, Nathan flew in to help me get through this. I became aware of how much these children deserve to be free from the chaos they were born into, as I watched him engage with my nieces and nephew, using play to teach them basic engineering concepts. Ashley is still in and out of consciousness, but she is stable presently. The baby's condition is still dire. Although I've taken an emergency leave of absence, I have some important project deadlines to attend to in Boston next week. How I feel about things is still a mystery to me. My fury is still there, but it's mixed up with other feelings I can't quite put my finger on. The youngsters who somehow know about me, the preserved chamber, and the unsent letters are all making me rethink how I perceived the previous 6 years. I have to return to the hospital right now to get an update on the baby's health. Next week, when I return to Boston, I will write more. I'm just attempting to live day by day for the time being. Update 3. After spending another week in Connecticut, this time with Nathan, I just got back to Boston. It was a complex experience. Ashley asked me to invite him expressly because she wanted to meet the person who makes her sister happy. The dynamics were revealing and unpleasant. I made a startling discovery while we were there. I discovered years' worth of Ashley's treatment records while assisting my mother with organizing some medical paperwork. My parents never disclosed to me that she had been dealing with bipolar disorder since she was in her teens. Manic episodes occurred at the same time as the numerous pregnancies and relationship problems. This information adds another level of complexity to the process, but it does not justify the way they treated me. The most pivotal event occurred when I spoke with Ashley privately in her hospital room. She was more lucid than I had seen her in years, most likely as a result of taking her medications as prescribed following the accident. She acknowledged that, even in high school, she had envied my success and security. "You made everything look so easy," she stated, and I felt like the family disappointment in comparison. Neither of us missed the irony. Nathan's presence proved to be quite important. I was too deeply invested to notice what he saw. One evening at supper, he pointed out that my father was unable to look me in the eye, displaying signals of intense embarrassment instead of the apathy I had always imagined. Additionally, he saw my mother's tense tendency to begin statements and then stop them quickly, seemingly out of fear of saying the wrong thing. The children now play a big role in my emotional equation. Charlie, 6 million, my oldest nephew, showed me his architectural drawings, which were sloppy but sincere attempts to replicate images of my work that my parents must have shown him. When the younger ones, Ava, 4F, and Lucas, 2M, begin referring to Nathan as uncle, it has a deeper impact on him than he anticipated. The infant will need to remain in the NICU for at least another month, although her condition has stabilized. My parents have been sleeping in the waiting area on shifts, refusing to leave their grandchildren alone. According to a nurse who spoke to us during one of our hospital stays, they appear emotionally and physically worn out. I've made some sensible choices. A family therapist with expertise in intergenerational trauma is what I'm setting up. I've also discussed working remotely for a few days every month with my company. I haven't changed my mind about returning to Connecticut, though. I now live and work in Boston. On the way back to Boston, Nathan and I had a lengthy conversation. His statement, "Sometimes the hardest part of healing isn't forgiving others. It's forgiving yourself for still caring, really resonated with me. I've been feeling bad about not being able to control my rage in its purest protective form, so this really spoke to me. I have a crucial client meeting tomorrow, so I must concentrate. Strangely, at the moment, routine work duties feel both anchoring and inconsequential. After our first family therapy appointment, which is set for next week, I'll provide another update. Update 4. Something important happened during my parents' trip to Boston last weekend, so I had to write this update. You read correctly. They traveled to Boston ostensibly to talk about important issues pertaining to the family situation. I initially consented to meet them in a neutral setting, a peaceful cafe close to the public garden. But they persisted in touring my residence because they claimed to be interested in learning more about my life. I reluctantly consented after speaking with Nathan and establishing explicit guidelines on the length of their stay. It was surprising how they responded to my house. Normally stoic, my father broke down when he saw my architecture awards in my home office. However, their true purpose caught me completely off guard. They produced paperwork that demonstrated they had been covertly putting money aside for me ever since they expelled me. I've never witnessed my father sobbing so much in my life. He clarified that for 6 years, they had established a different savings account and contributed the amount equal to my college tuition each month. It has grown to a significant amount with interest. Their justification? They intended to leave it in their will because they were too embarrassed to deal with me personally. A fierce confrontation resulted from this revelation. I let out years' worth of suppressed rage because I could no longer contain it. Do you think money can fix what you did? I yelled. I lived in my vehicle. I didn't eat. I tried to keep up my grades by working till I was worn out. My father then made a statement that really stopped me cold. We don't expect forgiveness, he stated. We just want you to know that your suffering has haunted us every single day. He then showed me his diary, which detailed all of my accomplishments that he had followed over the years via social media and professional networks. He mentioned my advancements, my first significant project, and even the Sustainable Design Prize I received the previous year. After sobbing quietly, my mother finally opened out about Ashley's past mental health issues. Evidently, they had observed similar behavioral tendencies in Ashley's early years, but disregarded the warning signs in favor of managing me as the stable child. She acknowledged that their parenting style had been completely incorrect. When they mentioned their most recent worries, the topic of conversation changed. They disclosed that Marcus, Ashley's ex-husband, is attempting to obtain full custody of their child by using the accident and Ashley's history of mental illness. Just as she is beginning to stabilize with her new medicine regimen, they are concerned that this could lead to another breakdown. This is when the situation becomes complex. I'm no longer being asked to relocate back. Rather, they are asking me to assist them in locating a reputable mental health center in Boston for Ashley and the child after she is discharged from the NICU, in order to assist with the other children while Ashley receives the care she needs. They wish to sell their Connecticut home and relocate closer. Nathan, who remained close by to provide assistance if necessary, subsequently made a significant observation. They're finally acknowledging their mistakes and trying to find actual solutions, instead of just dumping responsibilities on you. I'm still taking it all in. Although the money they save doesn't change the past, their persistent covert efforts at making amends reveal a level of regret I hadn't previously thought of. My father's journal seems like a heartbreaking reminder of what might have been a father who was proud of his daughter's accomplishments, but was too embarrassed to say so out loud. To learn more about Ashley's custody dispute and what part, if any, I should play in it, I'm meeting with a family law lawyer tomorrow. Additionally, I'm looking into psychiatric hospitals that focus in postpartum mental health treatment. Regarding my assistance with Ashley's treatment plans, I have not responded to them. Although I have a strong desire to uphold rigid limits, I also acknowledge that this could be an opportunity for genuine, structural change in our family's dynamic. This time, with the right boundaries and expert assistance, things could be different. Once I've decided how I want to participate in these new developments, I'll provide another update. Update 5. I've made some decisions regarding my relationship with my family going forward after giving it a lot of thought and attending multiple family therapy sessions. Initially, in response to my parents' inquiry concerning Ashley's care, I assisted them in locating a respectable mental health and postpartum care center in Boston. I did, however, clarify that my participation would be strictly limited and professional. Although I will not be personally involved in Ashley's daily care, I was able to connect them with the resources they needed through my professional network. My parents' savings account has been transformed into a trust fund, of which I am the trustee, for Ashley's children's education. This arrangement guarantees that the funds will be utilized suitably while upholding professional boundaries. Nathan used his financial planning and contacts to assist put things up. I never imagined how my relationship with my family would change over time. I've developed a methodical approach to keeping in touch that safeguards my personal well-being. Even if I won't be returning to Connecticut or taking on any caregiving duties, we've decided to continue family therapy sessions and have frequent video chats with the kids, with Ashley being contacted directly only in case of emergencies. Even though my mother still calls a lot, I've seen a big shift in the way she handles things. She no longer makes demands or guilt trips before providing family information, and she respects my limits when I tell her that I'm too busy to talk. My father made the most unexpected revelation. In addition to sending me a formal written apology outlining particular occasions in which he failed me as a father, he began visiting his own therapist. Instead of the cliched, "I'm sorry for everything," I had anticipated, I received a considerate acknowledgement of particular negative behaviors and how they affected my life. After being admitted to the treatment center, Ashley is beginning to show recovery. At last, the infant is well and no longer in the NICU. I've made arrangements for a child psychologist to work with her older children to help them deal with these changes while I keep an emotional distance. I've decided not to include my family too much in our wedding arrangements, which Nathan and I are moving forward with. Although they will be invited as guests, friends who helped me through my darkest moments will play the customary family roles in the wedding. I am content with my choices as I look to the future. It's a carefully planned relationship that safeguards my mental health while recognizing the intricacy of familial ties. Even though it's not the total reunion some might expect for, I've discovered that taking care of family members doesn't have to mean compromising my own health or giving into toxic relationships. There isn't a tidy, happy ending to my story where everything is forgiven and forgotten. Rather, it ends realistically, with relationships being reframed on better terms, professional assistance being sought, and boundaries being upheld. That's the best we can do at times, and that's acceptable. My last update will be this one. We are grateful to everyone who helped and counseled us along the way. I was able to strike a balance between self-preservation and compassion because of your ideas.